I won't repeat all that. Welcome to the work session. We're going to call the meeting to order. We're going to call the roll. Vice Mayor.
Present.
Alderman Blanton. Here. Alderman Hanson.
Here.
Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Alderman Berger.
Present.
Alderman Brown.
Present.
Alderman Potts.
Present.
And Alderman Baggett.
Present.
And the mayor's here too. So I do have a few comments cards, and we'll offer those folks that want to speak at the, excuse me just a second. We'll offer those folks that have submitted speaker cards at a moment in time after we've had some board discussion and some presentation to the board. And most of those are about middle eight, and that's why we started early, to make sure we cover everything. So we're going to start out, we're going to talk about items 1 and 2, which is the rezoning and development plan for the middle eight PUD subdivision. So, Emily?
Yeah, I think just from a staff standpoint, wanted to add a little more information related to the building height question we discussed some 2 weeks ago. Have Emily sort of walk through that for you as maybe a clarification on that element, and then really turn it over to you all and the applicant to discuss the proposed project. Take away.
Yeah, so mainly the reason we were discussing some of the building height changes at the last meeting is because those figures had differed a little bit from what was presented at the preliminary recommendation by the Historic Zoning Commission. So normally the process would be that it would go back to Historic Zoning Commission before coming to Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. But given where this is in the process, there is an alternate solution if you'd like to proceed with it. And regarding condition number 91, where staff had recommended that the building height be no taller than 2 feet 6 inches taller than Jameson Station, that could be amended. And we recommend that if you do want to amend that condition, the wording might be something like the height of the multifamily buildings are appropriate as depicted on the development plan, and that the final height of the buildings in the Historic Preservation Overlay, the HPO, will be determined by the Historic Zoning Commission with their certificate of appropriateness. That process has to be followed anyways, regardless, because the buildings are in the HPO. So this would not add additional steps at this point in the process. So that is a possible amended motion if you'd like to make it when this comes before you. And that's really all I had. We did the full presentation last time, so I'd like to turn over any time left to applicants and citizen comments.
Sure, let's go to applicants then.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask a question on this topic? So let's say it goes back and they say it's not appropriate, they don't do the height change. Does it come back here? I mean, at that point, if you have to drop the floor, what then happens after that? I
No,
guess?
it would not come back here at that point. It would just be changes made at the site plan level through that certificate of appropriateness process.
Good afternoon. My name's Dwight Kaiser. For those of you that don't know me, I am with Kaiser Vogren Design. Most of you have been dealing with my partner, Gary, who got his toe stuck in the sand this week, so I'm covering for him in the meantime. I have been involved in this project from the outset. I'm happy to have the entire Truland team here tonight, all consultants, if there should be any questions that pop up. We certainly appreciate the work and dedication that we've been doing with staff and leaders of the city. We were apprised of this proposed language to amend the comment, and I'm very happy to say that we are in complete agreement with it. We have no issues with it at all. And based on that, we would ask for your approval at the upcoming meeting. First vote of this project tonight. Again, I know there's a lot of questions here. Last time we tried to make a presentation. It's not happening this time. We're here for answers, and depending on what that question might be, I'll call up our team. Thank you.
Okay. Board? Go ahead, Alderman Peters.
Just to talk about the rezoning. And because I want to say these in two different aspects. If you remember, the request for rezone was to rezone to 38.9. That would mean 38 dwelling units per acre for this. And I now understand that the acreage would have included all the little single-family and townhouse and duplex and everything together. So it means that the actual large buildings would be extremely dense. And if you look, other than the Harpeth, which is slightly less density itself, within a 2 miles of downtown, if you just look at the 15 blocks of downtown and you have a 2-mile radius around that, then this is 2 or 3 times the density of the other apartments that are within this area. 2 or 3 times or more density than there are within, as I say, within the 2 mile of the block. Basically inside McCatcher, basically nothing like this. And of course, this is extremely close to downtown. And so that is one of the main things that I would say whenever we talk about the development plan. There are some other comments that I have to make, but just thinking about how this does not fit.
You have the floor if you'd like to go ahead and talk about the development plan. I thought we'd consider both of them at
both
the
of them
same
together.
time.
Okay. So,
Or I can come
The-
back to you if you like.
well, I have a concern about the height compared to the height of Jameson Station. Have a concern about the median proposed on Liberty Pike, which I don't think is appropriate and would be workable. I also have a concern about the stormwater already with all of this land that's, able to soak the water in right now because it just has plants, trees and things like that on it. There's already a problem with, just water rushing down to the people below this because, and I guess we should say this overall, once you get away from Liberty Pike, everything just drops down, 15, 25 feet right away. And then there are a lot of other houses below, where Daniels kind of turns around but a lot of them were built or else raised so that they would be out of the floodplain, but they're still having problem with stormwater coming through. The other thing is on the historic area. We of course, the Truett House, is not a part of this, not at all. But I have found out some things since we started looking at this. The Truett House, although it was not a part of this acreage, was commandeered by the Union General Schofield on November 30th, 1864. And while he was there, young Edwin Truett, whose family lived there, saw cannons being wheeled into position and men on foot and on horseback. And they were using the Truett greenhouse, which is not a part of the Truett home, that's not a part on this, as a paying station. And since then, I have found, and I left it up here, I guess, but if you want to turn it up, there is a 1983 map that was put together for a preservation conference.
Can you not hear? hang on just a second. Can you not hear Alderman Berger?
Okay, well, let me speak up a little bit, but
Please.
But I've had my thing, but I can do my teacher talk, I guess. Okay. Well, if I'm going to reference to it, yes, that was a 1983 map of Franklin, and there was a preservation conference here, and on it they have the map of Franklin existing, roads and things like that. But they have also, if you look on it, have all these little brown areas where they identified the exact location of federal fortifications. They're on there. And they have those little brown places there. I'll come back to that in just a minute. Also, Virginia Bowman's book states that the Truett Floral Company is also, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say. One of the important things is, if you look on that up at the top off of Liberty Pike, you will see since in 1973, a street called Daniels Drive. It has a little brown mark there, which indicates that there was a Union fortification there on Daniels Drive. And we're talking about in this area. Now, we're not talking about the house. We're talking about in this area.
Is this relative to the rezoning
Yeah.
and the development plan?
Yes, it is.
I'd like a point of order as well, or clarification, may I? Because this is not our purview. It's not our jurisdiction at all. We're here about zoning. Historic Zoning Commission, we're now taking on the Historic Zoning Commission's role. And I'm very uncomfortable with that because that is not our jurisdiction. And no matter what Ms. Alderman Peterson or Alderman Berger or anybody thinks or feels about this, we can think and feel all night long. This is not what our vote is about tonight, and we're off topic. So I would ask that we stick to the topic of zoning.
Well, I beg your pardon. Part of the development plan involves all of this, and now I'm finding out it is more, there's more historical than just the Truett House.
Mayor, there's one person in this room, well, there's a lot of people in this room that have dealt with battlefield preservation. Julian Bibbs in the back, but Eric Jacobson did the historic review of this house for the applicant. He is the
Yes.
executive director of the Battle of Franklin's Trust. I assure you. And I just looked at the little brown dot. I'm happy. I think we should follow up with that point with Eric
Yes.
Jacobson for if it goes to second reading, because there is a brown dot. But I certainly don't think he would have omitted the fort in his overview.
Well, let me
never
say
heard
to you,
before.
I don't know whether many people have seen this. It was 30 years ago whenever they did it. And I don't know whether even people who are looking at things now knew that that was available. But it is certainly there, and it shows all of the things. And so I think, what I'm trying to say is, I think historical is more than just, and in fact, Virginia Bowman's book states that the Truett Floral Company is the oldest of its kind in Tennessee and thought to be the first south of the Ohio River. And it stayed in the Truett family. In other words, it wasn't just a house. That's the
Yeah.
historical aspect of it. And I've spoken to somebody who grew up here, and they said they remember going to the greenhouse, not located next to the house. So it might be in this area here.
Could I help clear something up for your point? Because, and you have a right to make that point. May I clear up one thing with that? Do you mind? May I? Just briefly. I won't take a second. With Eric Jacobson, who did do this total review, to uncover the history, his report confirmed that the house was primarily used for a nursery business, nursery stock, and greenhouse were damaged during the war. Schofield retreated to the house before moving on to Nashville, but what they did learn was otherwise consistent with what they presented at the Historic Zoning Commission. The historian's report since last November And the summary of the information was presented at the historic overview at the Historic Zoning Commission submissions. So they had them at the submissions, and and they were satisfied with what they had, and there were no further questions or requests made from the Historic Zoning Commission. And that's why I chimed in with saying, I think that they did their homework, they did their review, they presented that information, they presented the historic information, and for us to sit here and talk about that tonight, go back and watch that. I mean, Patrick's right, we do have another vote, and we will have some time to look at that in case you had some concerns. And that, I'm not saying they weren't valid, Alderman Peterson, I'm just bringing that point up because we can talk about that at length. Thank you.
Do you need to make any other points about the development plan or the rezoning, Alderman Peterson?
Well, I will let that go, and then whenever other people have something, I may have one or two
Okay.
things. Oh, I know, stormwater, the pervious surface there. It says someplace in the development plan that 40% of this is open space. Does that mean 40% of it is surface where water can soak in? Or what? I've never seen it, but I've heard that said by the development team.
We've got the
That's
development team right here.
40%.
Let's let them answer that
40% open
question.
space? I've heard it said more than once.
Let me bring it.
I'm Katie Rudowski. I'm with Kaiser Vogren Design. So I'll explain that a little bit further. And Emily, please correct me if I misspeak. So open space in the city of Franklin, defined by the zoning ordinance, is the area of both impervious and pervious surface. So Franklin defines that as, in our case, I think it's required 20%. And so we are actually, I think it's required 5%. So we are showing overall 40% open space on the site. Landscape surface ratio is a little bit different. That is just green space. So that is what infiltrates through the ground. That is not concrete, hardscape, any of that. In this case, we're required 20%, but we're providing 30% on the site. So hopefully that clarifies a little bit.
Okay,
I do have one further thing.
sure.
They have requested on the development plan, instead of the 620 parking places, that's parking spaces that our ordinance requires now, they have, let's see, I want to say 486 or something like that. It's 21% less than what our zoning ordinance requires. And I think that that is not reasonable at all.
And since you brought that up, maybe the development team might address how you came up with the parking ratio that Alderman Peterson has questioned.
Expert number 2.
Dwight? What do you do? You just, you kind of herd cats like I do, don't you?
He cooks the crawfish.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Megan Sigler with KCI Technologies. We worked on the parking study. So we used a combination of different things. First, we look at ITE, which is the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They collect data from across the nation to determine average parking demand based off of number of bedrooms. So that's how we got our base numbers. Then we also added in a little bit of a buffer for visitor spaces. But then we also wanted to double check, since we know that ITE is nationwide, not necessarily specific to Franklin. So we actually went out and we collected data at 7 existing sites in the middle of the night to count and see how many empty spaces they have. And the ratio for existing is like 1.35 parking spaces per occupied bedroom, occupied unit, and we're proposing 1.59, I believe, so over the parking ratio for other developments in the area.
Well, but let me say, we have numbers that everyone has had to fulfill. And so I'm wondering, does that, indicate that we ought to change ours because we had to increase because we were not having enough parking spaces? And also, this is not just going to be at 11 o'clock at night either, because there are going to be people indeed who might be coming to the factory and park over there, and there is no place to park. I mean, if you go in there right now, everything.
Just to add in, our multifamily parking requirements are some of the highest that we have seen in not only the state, but we have some of the higher parking requirements. So that is because we were running into issues with some of our existing developments. But I will say now we may be a little farther the other direction, and it may be time to come back down and do some more studies on that. The last time we did a study on the parking requirements for multifamily was 2013.
Just,
Are you finished? And I'm going to recognize Alderman Brown, if I may. Alderman Brown.
yeah, I just wanted to talk on the parking thing. I actually went and I found a Harvard study that actually references ITE, and it was actually a really great study. And what was interesting is it was talked about not only sort of the difference between single-family home and apartments, and the data was pretty amazing. It was not only was it they owned one more or one plus more car in a single family than they do in apartments, but it was actually the number of trips per day was 42% more coming from single-family homes than was coming from apartments. And one of the other things that they talked about was the idea of geography. So if you have apartments by a highway that don't have walkable communities, you actually see more trips and more need for parking than you do if you see an apartment complex, for example, next to a factory in a downtown where you have a walkable community. And so the reality is that from a parking perspective, if we're opening up, if we don't put a walkable community within reach of the factory, we're going to have to reach out and draw people into the factory in order to sustain the factory, which means more traffic and more parking based on this really what I thought was a really great study and a really great information. It really kind of explains it and breaks it down. So, yeah. Anyway.
Who else?
I don't know if I'm on or off. I would also make the point, I do believe, and I've been to all these presentations, and I do remember in the back of my mind, that you have controlled parking. So people who are going to use the factory can't come over and use your parking spaces. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is correct?
Yes.
Alderman Baggett.
Emily, so because this is important because this parking ratio and
Yep.
the way they calculated and studied, is that similar to the way that we as staff, or you as staff, would have approached it? I mean, I know it would have been probably done through like we'd have consulted that out.
Probably done a more comprehensive
Right.
look locally,
Yeah.
but based on, we would look to ITE first for the baseline like they did.
Right.
And we have evaluated their parking study, and we recommend approval of the modification of standards based on their methodology.
Okay.
Because I think that's important, because I have heard over the year and a half that I've been here, and maybe a little longer, from folks who do develop multifamily in Cool Springs that they do feel like it's excessive. So it's actually kind of interesting to hear that this is how this is flushing out. Thank you.
Let me ask a question. Are you going to have an attendant working there? As I recall, I heard that there would
It's a
be a
slider.
parking attendant there
Slider.
working all the time?
Slider.
That is correct. We have 26 guest places underneath the building, and of course, controlled access for all of the residents. So, yeah. Is there someone there at 12 o'clock midnight? I know, again, we get down to the details of finalized design, but access through the gate and things of that nature. Charlie, can you add to that?
There's
Operationally, we need to figure out exactly how we still want to operate it, whether it's a combination of technology and manned
Yeah.
resources. But there will be a gate to come in, and it will be secure and private. And if you're there as a visitor or a guest or visiting the cafe, the small market area that we're still trying to define fully, you'd have to pull a ticket. You only get out by having it validated. So whether there's a person there or it's an automated system, it will be completely controlled. And we need to do that in order to maintain the parking that's needed.
Yep.
We've asked for less, and we don't want it to be a problem for the people that live there, so we'll need to highly control it.
I might add, because I'd asked you all about that. My son had an apartment when he first moved back here from DC, and he was in 12 South, above Jenny's Ice Cream. And they had controlled
Hang on
parking.
just a second. Y'all can't hear? There you
Okay.
go. Pull it a little
Can you
closer.
hear me? Well, can you hear me? I got a loud voice. I raised 3 boys. I know how to yell. Now, they did it to me. I'm sorry. So anyway, when my son lived down in 12 South, and I don't know if this is working. I don't think it is.
It's working.
Is it? Okay. Down in 12 South, above Jenny's Ice Cream, they had an ice cream store and a few other things. But if you wanted to use that, it's all technology. You can go in, you get your ticket validated and all that, but all the residents had their own passes and went into a different part of the garage. So you can control that. There's so many things you can do. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
Alderman Potts.
Thank you, sir. Make sure y'all can hear me. All right, there
Can you
we
hear
go.
Alderman Potts?
Speaking in, check one.
These aren't working.
How many visitor spots are there again, please?
Megan?
Sorry. There is going to be 33 visitor spots, visitor/restaurant cafe spots.
And how many resident?
The 367. And then that doesn't count the on-street parking. That's also going to be along, what's it called? Sorry.
Foster Lane.
Foster Lane.
Foster Lane.
And how many are there?
Along Foster Lane, there is, hold on, flipping, 45.
And of those, sized or compact only? Do you have a count on that?
No, not yet.
It's relevant. Yes. So, there you go.
That's why
So, well, I'm asking also for height too. What's the plan right now if you've got your 367 residents, if you find that you need more residential parking? Are you going to take from your 33 visitor spots?
No. So there are alternative ways to encourage less parking. So you can, as part of the leasing aspect, encourage people to not need each unit for vehicles or however it may be. So there's ways to limit parking.
Did you say discourage residents from parking or?
No, not discourage them from parking, but discourage them from having multiple vehicles.
So I'll leave that where it is, but again, circling back, is there consideration as we go through this process to have a plan for additional residential parking and to remove some of those 35 or those 33? So I would just ask that because it doesn't sound like that hasn't been flushed out completely.
Couldn't the 33 be maybe used? Because you have all that, you have 45 on-street parking. I mean, you've got a lot of on-street parking.
But that's not, but the controlled factor here for parking is the 33 visitor parking that's underground, correct?
Correct.
And the 367 that are underground, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's my focus area right there for this question, is would you be willing to remove some of the visitor parking to allow for more residential? And that's, you gave me your answer, so thank you.
Anybody else? Alderman Baggett or Alderman Brown?
He took a breath, so I thought he might be not gearing up, and I don't want to. A few things. One, I think in this plan, and we put a lot of thought into it, I think, as aldermen, and I think spent a lot of time with the community and also At times, we've had good communication with you all. You all have been communicating with the community as well, which I think from the development standpoint, when the applicants do get and communicate with the community and try and get their plan out there, I think that's a good thing. Now, you followed all of the processes that our city lays out. And I think one thing I heard from the community is that they didn't feel like they were notified in time. And I think that's something that I think we've all heard that I think is a very valid point, that even though we did follow you followed the processes. You did everything you were required to do. I think that one takeaway is that we might should look at that, especially on specific projects. And so from the community, I've heard that. I don't blame you all. I think we need to think about when we do have these kinds of developments that maybe need to go further. I would like for us to consider possibly sending letters out a little bit further, if that's something the board wishes. The other thing I want to talk about was Old Liberty Pike, and I walked Old Liberty Pike, went in many of your backyards, and beautiful backyards, beautiful front yards, but the street. And I want Bowman to hear this. Old Liberty Pike is in need of attention, and I will be pushing for in our CIP, looking at some of those improvements in addition to what the developer is doing and being required to do in that area. Sidewalks. There's parking issues. There are some existing stormwater issues on Old Liberty that very fair points that have been made, that if the stormwater, and this is one thing I would like to hear if we do pass this to the second reading, I want the existing stormwater structure may not all be, because it is old and it is in the flood zone, and I just want to get some confirmation from staff and the stormwater. I see over there stormwater, but confirmation that what this is tying into, and I know this will happen at the site plan level. And so, but it's going to be really important because where this all goes to and making sure that the stormwater on Old Liberty works properly is really important to the residents. And so I want to make that clear. Parking on Old Liberty, we got just apart from this, just in regular, routine business of Old Liberty Pike, speaking to the size of my truck, it's hard for the truck to get down. I parked on the side by the Crockett's and felt a bit guilty, even though it's legal parking, by the way, that you can't get by. I mean, you can't get by. And I do have concerns that with the parking or with the traffic flows, that could be an issue. So I really think that's important. I know you all looked at that. Part of that's us and part of that's, this project, but it's really important that we don't get that wrong, because Old Liberty Pike in its current state, I think needs to be addressed. The houses on Old Liberty Pike, I asked for this from the applicant, and the rear exits of the homes on Old Liberty are 280 feet away from the largest building, which is about 93 yards. Someone check my math, and but I just did it on my phone, but it's almost a football field. And then there's the duplexes in between it. I still have concerns about that view shed. And there's about 3 lots that are really impacted, maybe a little bit more on Daniels, but that is one thing. Stormwater, I talked about. Parking. Listen, I don't know, the community needs to know that, and this is a compliment to our staff. Our staff is not going to let something be underparked. That's why we have this the pendulum swung, because and I think this is showing that I think our staff is willing to work with applicants to come up with a common sense solution that I know that Emily is not, and staff and engineering, they're not going to bring us something that's going to come back and not park. History tells us that. Some will say that the history before we made the parking change, and bring that up, but we've made this parking change, and so we're working off the changed parking limit that we have now. We're not working off the old parking limit and reducing the old parking limit that caused the parking problems. We're working off the new parking limit. So I do have confidence in staff in parking. Size and density, this is a term. On your plan, the affordability issue and the density and the size is what I hear a lot from the community. And I know you've heard that too. And everyone's got a different opinion on what's appropriate and not appropriate for density. I would beg to differ with Alderman Peterson that the single families and the duplexes do count, because that is density. I mean, that does factor into the density of a project. Harpeth Square, I have zero complaints from traffic at Harpeth Square. Zero. I've not gotten one as an alderman. Zero. And they're almost double the density, I think, of this. Smaller acreage. What is the density of Harpeth? Do you have that density of Harpeth Square?
Do you have it with you?
It was 50.
It was
50 something. 50.
It was
60?
high. It was higher than what we're proposing when you exclude the hotel. When you
Okay,
look at
when you exclude
just
the hotel.
residential.
I retract
only.
that statement, but it is more. It is more.
Yes.
I'll stick to that. The last thing is on the historic importance, and I wrote an email to the Heritage Foundation, and I do appreciate them bringing that to the table last meeting. I definitely think, and I think a lot of us felt that a lot of that stuff, we would have liked to have seen that at the historic zoning, but it is well received. And so, to your point, Alderman Peterson, that I think that is important for us to look at. I think it is unfortunate it came in at the 11th hour, and again, I encourage them to be engaged earlier on in the process so that we can take, and the development community, a partner can take that into account, those concerns, because I know you all would have answered every single one of those questions or done X, Y, Z. Here we are at the 11th hour, and we have a historical interpretation of the property. There wasn't, quite frankly, a federal fort on this property. I mean, I know that with 100% certainty. Yes, I did, and we'll confirm it before. There was no federal fort on this property. Well, that's what.
No, it said
That's-
fortification.
Well, fortification and fort are synonymous.
No, pardon me, no. If you look at all those, if you look at all those things there, that was what they had, they call it fenestration or something
It-
like that. It's not a fort.
Okay, I apologize. There was, anyway, we will move on from that. But the whole point was I do appreciate what the Heritage Foundation said, but I would express would be my desire. And I hope you engage with them now, too, just to see if there are things that can be done. I'll give my time to Alderman Brown if you're next.
Actually, what I would love, Charlie, you or Dwight or somebody, you guys added to the packet at the page 5 of this, the trade-offs of the size of building. It's in the packet, so it's in the public, but we've never talked about it. You've never really sort of explained it. I think there'd be a worthwhile discussion here to have. As I've heard people talk, there are people for whom a one floor less is not going to change anything. It is a stop Middle 8 campaign, and there's a lot of them that just want it to stop. But there are a number of people who are looking for is there a compromise to be had here? And so if building height and density is the sort of final straw, or for a lot of people is the straw that's sort of breaking people, they're okay with the traffic, they get all of that. I would just like to have a conversation about this piece of it, because I think at the end of the day, for me, what's important about this development for me and the density of this for me is this factory district and this factory. The reality is we are not going to sustain that factory from a bunch of single-family homes around it. We're just not. Or they're going to have to do all they can to pull people in and bring all this traffic and cars in to be able to fulfill what's going on at that factory, from theaters to restaurants to entertainment to all of that. So we need a walkable community to give this factory a chance, to give it business. We have a downtown, we have a factory. This is a good place for this kind of density and a walkable community. We also don't have a lot of small inventory to be able to put people. So we could certainly find compromise in reducing a floor, but we lose a number of units to do that.
Yeah.
I think that's a decision that we could make here, that we're willing to lose attainable units, workforce units, in exchange for reducing a floor. if we think that losing a floor is actually gaining us something. And I'm not fully convinced at this point yet that we are gaining something, but I think it's worth a discussion.
Okay. The small units, you can think about them like the other commitments that we've made to the project. Can everyone hear me okay? The underground parking, the streetscape improvements, the courtyards in and around the buildings, the 4-story buildings with the 4-sided buildings, that cost is a commitment that we're making to this project that makes this project quite expensive to build. When we reduce the density, we need to think about the small unit commitment as a cost. They don't pay for themselves fully the way the large ones do. So when we start to spread all these project cost commitments across less units, it makes the cost per unit go up. So in order for the project to remain viable, we have to reduce the number of small units because they're already effectively a cost on the project. So when we drop a floor on the east building, we move conceptually based on the way Franklin defines workforce housing at 80 to 150% of area median income. We lose 29 units, but we need to actually switch out some of the small units for bigger units to get back to feasibility. So we lose 47 plus or minus small units just by dropping the penthouse level on the east building because of the cost pressures it puts on the project on a per unit basis.
So losing a floor, I'm sorry, can I ask this? Losing a floor, you reduce 30 units, but you lose 47 of the smaller units. Does that make sense?
You
Total
lose,
units, you lose 30.
You're primarily losing the smallest 1-bedrooms, the smallest 2-bedrooms, and you're actually picking up some of the biggest 2-bedrooms and the biggest 3-bedrooms.
And part of that cost obviously goes to each bedroom having to have a kitchen and the utilities, obviously, that go along with living. So we actually improve that cost when we absorb that 1-bedroom mini apartment into an existing 2-bedroom, and we drop, one of the kitchens. It's always a balancing act.
Alderman Potts, did we ever get back to you? Did you have all your questions answered or comments?
I did have a follow-up, actually, and I apologize. I don't have the data in front of me, but if you lose the 47 units, how many workforce or attainable housing units would you then have?
Approximately 129.
129. Okay.
Alderman Hanson.
So good conversation, because this leads me, I think it was you that I emailed on how the pricing actually goes on these units.
Yes.
Just so the public knows how this works. When you do commercial construction, the bank is setting a pro forma for what your rent has to be. So there can't be any kind of a deed restriction on these to maintain a lower price point, because a third party is maintaining your price and dictating the market in order for them to be able to pay back their mortgage in a feasible manner. So I was under the impression there were studio apartments in this development. Were there?
There are.
And those are what you'd be cutting some of, not 1-bedrooms as much,
Not
correct?
studios and 1-bedrooms.
So it's more affordable because it's smaller. But just know, and if it's sold to somebody else down the line, let's say they hit their 5-year mark with their financing and they're able to sell it in an open market in a competitive environment, and they sell it for maybe double what they have in it, the next person that purchases that is going to have a commercial loan, and subsequently they will be held to a pro forma with the bank, and those rents will increase based on that new purchase price. So there's no guarantee that these are ever going to be that affordable. And what I ultimately see living in these is like a pied a terre and in town for a more wealthy client who wants to be close to downtown, maybe have a little workplace or a little in town where they can enjoy downtown and then go back to their $2 million house. I have great concerns about that, and it would limit the parking because they probably only come down in one car instead of maybe having 2 cars in that scenario. I am concerned about the height, and I do understand that you would lose units, and I do understand how incredibly expensive it is to build, but I am having an issue with that height. Construction-wise, another concern that I have is this phase is out of historic. So with the historic facade requirement, you're going to have a more beautiful, appropriate product for the neighborhood, but when you phase out onto maybe a backside that's not under historic, what I don't want to see is like a Harper apartment situation where what we saw on paper that was so incredibly beautiful didn't translate into the final product. And I don't want to see people on Daniels looking at this flat brick wall that's very unattractive just because you can and because it's a huge cost savings. So I would need to see some kind of guarantee that something that's rendered is exactly what's delivered on all 4 sides so that somebody's not looking out of their backyard onto something that's not aesthetically pleasing when they're going to be losing their green space. And then I do have concerns, since you are backing up to a flood zone, about ultimately where that flood water is going to, and stormwater is going to go in incident of a large rain situation. Also, so we were talking about, Alderman Brown was talking about having people living in this complex to kind of fuel and feed the factory. But if we're saying that this is an affordable unit, affordable units tend to lend themselves to somebody that has less discretionary money, who probably is not going to be visiting the factory on a regular basis for extra spending on meals and entertainment. So I just am not seeing a homogeneous picture here. I see it if it's in-town people all day long, but I don't think that we should build something just to feed a commercial development. I think the commercial development should stand on its own, and I think we've seen that the factory has been able to stand on its own without a development over at least the 11 years that I've lived here. So I don't think that the inhabitants of here are going to make that significant financial impact on the factory. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Alderman Berger.
Well, what's happening on the site with stormwater now is going to be improved. We all know that. We have incredible regulations on the city side and the state side, so I'm not worried. That's definitely going to be a lot more improved. And then you have gardens and greenhouses that you're looking at a system of capturing some rainwater there as well to reuse on site. So that's also a good thing. And I don't think any of us up here are experts on stormwater, rainwater, and whatever. And that's why you hire experts to help do that. And you're building a very expensive site, and you can't afford to build something that does not function. So I'm not too worried about the stormwater there. In fact, I think everyone in the area will be greatly improved with what you do there. The historic piece, I don't know, Patrick, you said it or you were referencing it just, that, maybe some of it came, the historic nature of it came at the 11th hour. Well, really did not, because on my research, I went back and it said it was duly presented after the historian's report in November 2022. That's when the historian's report came, and that was presented at Historic Zoning Commission. So all that stuff has been not coming at the 11th hour. It's been around. We just, don't want to miss that. There is, we have a free market society still. At least yesterday and today, we still have a free market society. We don't know what's going to happen in a year or two. But the competitive environment you brought up, Alderman Hanson, it's a competitive environment. Factory, can it stand on its own? It probably can. But with a competitive environment, having that kind of development, appropriate development next to it, will definitely feed into the factory. And if people can afford to live there, and also even new startups and people that are finally coming into our community or coming back to live in our community, if they can get a little bit lower price point there, I mean, it's market value, of course, but it's a smaller place and it's a smaller rent than a larger place. They might have some more discretionary income. And I don't know one young person, and I probably say young person 40 years and younger, or 20 and 30s, that don't spend money on coffee and don't go to the coffee shops and don't go out to at least have one drink with some friends and sit around the Sky Bar at the factory. So I'm not worried about that. As a marketer, I'm telling you, that place is going to come together. And more feeding into it with more residents and more activity just makes it healthier. I'm not worried about the design. I'm not worried about people on Daniels Drive looking at it or Old Liberty Pike looking at it, because I've checked you out, Mr. Joe, and I can never remember your last name.
And Tunovich.
And Tunovich. That's a mouthful. And I should know that because I grew up around a lot of people with those names. But I commend you for having this gentleman here. Your architecture in your historic cities is magnificent. Magnificent. Don't think anybody's going to be looking at a stone wall. And also, the owners of the property are very picky about what goes behind them and how things look. So that's the least of my worries. And discretionary income for people, the factory might stand on its own, but will it all feed in? As a marketer, I can look at that and go, heck yeah, that's just 2 + 2 = 4. That's going to happen. I'm not so much worried about the height. It's a little bit bothersome in some ways, but at the same time, if I look at it all, if you leveled that whole site and didn't keep some of the old trees and you didn't put up any new landscaping and larger trees to come in the future, I want to know what this place will look like 5 years after it's built. I think it's going to look like any street I drive down or walk down in Charleston with the lovely trees and the gardens and your green spaces and your green whatever. So
Yeah.
I just say all that because I think that some of these things are like.
can move on, 'cause I've got other people
Are these
wanna
nail
speak.
biters or
Alderman.
something for me? Absolutely not. I think it's all been fairly well explained, actually very well explained. And thank you.
Alderman Blanton.
I'm pretty sure you can hear me. I think one of the common threads I've heard throughout this whole introduction of this project is, wow, it's a lot. Like, it's kind of that we didn't see it coming. And I think back, and I'm laughing because Rod Heller's in this room, and Rod Heller can remember a time when the Harpeth Square was coming, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot. And much like has been said here today, I think the mass of the Harpeth Square with the hotel and the apartments has been a great contribution to our community. I don't think that it has really stressed out our roads. I don't think it's stressed out our sidewalks. I think it's been a wonderful contributor to the amenities that we can offer for tourism and for residents. Rod, you can quote me. And I see Steve. And I think in the conversations that I've had with the applicants and knowing a couple of things that hit home for me. Number one, this isn't a developer that's come in from another community, aside from you as the architect. These people have skin in the game. This isn't their backyard. There's been a lot of thoughtful measures put into this. And to hear a conversation that I had that it was very adamant that the smaller units be put in first and everything else comes around it. To me, that speaks to the opportunity to continue with having opportunities not only for my children or seniors who want to age in place, but it brings a diversity to our community that we continue to try to celebrate on a balanced level. And to me, that is incredibly important. Am I excited about the factory and the factory district? Absolutely. I do not think that these two, in my opinion, and I respect you greatly, I don't think one hinges on the other. I think about We talk about development and growth should be put where there's infrastructure. We just finished Franklin Road. We talk about walkable communities. Well, we're ahead of the game when it comes to walkable there. The median in Liberty Pike does not bother me at all because it's a natural way to slow down traffic when you have pedestrians. So everything has been, to me, built around it. And when you talk about for the neighbors and the view shed, traffic, I would assume, would be one of the biggest hurdles, but also the view shed. I live, which you can Google where I live, but I live over by Centennial High School. 23 years ago, I built a house that I knew I would see the Friday night lights out my kitchen window. I bought into that. Did I know a Drury Inn was going to also be built outside my kitchen window? No. But you kind of start getting used to things around you that change. I think it's a hard decision for us as community leaders to do things when you have any kind of pushback. And change is hard, but change can also be good. I think this board has moved into a time where we're being a little bit more creative about the projects that we're listening to and accepting. And I think that's exciting. I think Franklin still is a predominantly single family dwelling kind of community. And that's what I grew up in 45 years ago. But for us to continue to be relevant and offer people to have their children around them, which thank God I do, all but one, and be able to, for myself, be able to continue to stay in a community that I love, the options are very few. That's how I feel about where we are today.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah. Earlier in the conversation, you were talking about if you had to drop units, you would drop the one bedroom units, but you also said they were the least profitable. Tell me again why you would object to dropping the least profitable of the units if height was an issue, if density was an issue, if parking was an issue. All of those things were adding to your issues that you were trying to address tonight. Why would you, I guess, worry about dropping a single family unit? I'll be honest with you. They may fall under the guidelines of affordable, but they're still very expensive units.
It's Franklin.
We're not hiding from that. The units are market rate. They're going to be what the market is at the time that the project delivers. And given the limited supply in this community, chances are rent and housing cost will continue to go up. The only lever as a market rate developer that we have to help control cost into the future is to think creatively, to think about how can we deliver something that meets someone's needs in less space. And so we found in studying the market that only 1% of the units that were built from 2014 till today were studios. Of 4,700 apartments built since then, that's only 47 units. So we thought it was an opportunity to address a need that has really not been addressed very well at all. In a great walkable location with units as small as 420 square feet. The studios that have been built are 618 square feet on average. So one of the questions that we got is, does this work? Can you show me that this works? And Williamson County hasn't really responded to that need yet, but Nashville has. You can rent really efficiently great units in downtown Nashville in beautiful buildings for less than you can rent in Williamson County because they're smaller. We toured a couple weeks ago a 518 square foot one bedroom that was magnificent and it worked perfectly. And it was significantly cheaper than most one bedrooms that are new in Williamson County, just because of size. So it's the easiest way for us to control that. It still costs a lot to create that. So that it's a careful balance of how much of that can we actually afford to do and still have a project that can attract capital.
And the second question, how would you discourage someone from owning more than one car or two cars, whatever it was?
I'm glad that came up again because I do want to address that. This is not unique to our project. Most property management companies that operate multifamily buildings like this, to a certain degree, will discourage people, especially in affluent markets where people have collector cars and multiple cars, from trying to store 2 or 3 or even 4 cars. We don't want that. We want an adequate number of spaces to meet people's daily needs. And if you have collector cars, there's storage units for that. There's other options. So we need to price having an extra parking space at a price point that discourages that kind of behavior. That's all we're focused on.
I had a couple of questions, if I might. First of all, I've heard rent and for sale both. Are there units for sale?
Within the apartment buildings, no. All of the apartments will be built for rent.
Okay, and then the duplexes or the other buildings or homes are for sale then? Is that my understanding?
They'll be platted on individual lots for sale.
Okay. I did want some clarification. I heard the comment that there wasn't adequate notice. If I understand it correctly, and Emily, you correct me, this project has come forward in a little different fashion in that it was marketed in the community before it was ever shown to staff, which would, when staff gets it and it's submitted, then it triggers those public meetings. So if that's not correct, correct me, but that's my understanding. It's my understanding that all public notification was met and there were no variances on that. I appreciate the discussion on open space and landscape ratio. That was good. The parking, I think that's a good explanation. I did want to go back to the stormwater because I keep hearing that, and that is a major concern. One of the questions I would have is TDOT is going to replace the bridge on Franklin Road. We know that bridge acts like a dam. I think that would offer some improvement in the floodplain in those areas. I don't know exactly what that is, so I think that might be something I'd like to hear at some time. I appreciate the clarification on Eric Jacobson. That triggered something in my mind. And then lastly, I think they just repaved Old Liberty.
It's still narrow, but it is
narrow.
beautifully paved, but it is still narrow.
So I'd like to go ahead and ask the citizens that wanted to speak to come, if that's okay with the board. So I'm going to call out your name, and if you'd line up in that order at the podium, and we're going to give you 2 minutes each. So listen up. Barry Beasley, followed by Mike Reinfeld, Elizabeth Crockett, Lisa Alexander, Lori Bell, Hennon Bell, Thomas Bell, and Mark Driscoll. I'm sorry?
Margie Bell.
Margie, I'm going to let you go up there, but I think I just skipped over yours. So we'll put you second.
Yeah.
So I'll make sure that I got everybody. Go ahead, Barry.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Barry Beasley, President and CEO of the Heritage Foundation. For 56 years, the Heritage Foundation has advocated for the preservation of our historic and cultural resources. In October of 2022, we met with the Middle 8 developers. After reviewing the project, we shared our appreciation for their intentional vision to unite the Franklin community through a new housing initiative. At that time, we also shared our best practice recommendation for understanding the historic significance of this property through ground penetrating radar and an archaeological survey prior to any future development. To be clear, the Heritage Foundation's evaluation of this project started on day one, not to the 11th hour. We're having conversations every day in this community on this project and others. The concerns we raised really should matter to everyone simply for consideration rather than resistance. We're a historic community, and this has a lasting impact on Franklin. As stated to the board before, we agree with the neighbors' concerns about height, density, and most importantly, the impact this project will have on the historic properties nearby. Without doubt, the Heritage Foundation recognizes the sentiment of the Middle Eight project, including the creation of an arts and cultural district. Our hope is that projects similar to this can be accomplished while maintaining the historic character and landscape of Franklin Road and our historic downtown corridor. These spaces represent the very essence of what makes our community a welcoming place for all. The Heritage Foundation's daily advocacy work doesn't always make the news, but it's at the very core of the Heritage Foundation's mission to protect not only the historic Truett House and its landscape, but also all of our resources that vitally contribute to saving our history and culture for present and future generations. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mike Reinfeldt at 119 Jameson Station Lane. I spoke at the March meeting, the April meeting, the May meeting, and the June meeting, so I'll be very quick. I think we've heard it all, the height, the parking, the traffic, the density, the flooding issues. There's just too many issues with this, and it's going to negatively impact the quality of life of these people here wearing red. It's going to greatly change their quality of life. I guess I'm just asking for some protection from you all or some guidelines to help protect the quality of life that we have here in Franklin. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Crockett, and I live at 166 Franklin Road, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. We, the neighbors of the Middle Eight project, knew nothing about this till the Historic Zoning Commission approved it. Then we got our letters in the mail about this project. If we had known about them, we could have gone to their meetings and presented our concerns. It's too late. You all have no interest. I'm sitting here watching you, and our concerns. No, I did not hear anybody with interest in our concerns at all. So it's our neighborhood being destroyed with you all voting on it. But let me just tell you a few of our concerns. This project is too dense for our area, just way too dense. This is a little area, too dense, talking about widening the road. The traffic every Saturday morning with the factory it's so large. We have a policeman there every Saturday morning directing the traffic. This traffic is going to be like this now daily, not just Saturday morning. This is daily. This is our neighborhood. And I know that doesn't mean a lot, but it is our neighborhood. Please think about this before you approve this project in its current form. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Lisa Alexander, 160 Lancaster Drive. Again, a familiar face. I've been here every month too. I don't remember who said it, referenced the project making us be more like Charleston, but you know what? I live here because it's not Charleston, and I could live anywhere. I love Franklin for what it is. At the Factory District meeting last night, I was with a group gathered around an aerial shot which outlined the land proposed to be included in the new district. Questions were asked about the streetscapes proposed for Liberty Pike, and I asked if it wouldn't be wise to coordinate with the Middle Eight developers on that part of the project. Eric told us that the city had, in fact, reached out to the development team, but they weren't interested. But he also said he got it. They'd been working on this project for 2 years, and waiting would cost more money. As we continue through this process, I bring it up for one reason. The development team are great professionals who've invested years and probably hundreds of millions of dollars thus far into the project, and they need to close the deal. Success for them is a vote to approve. But what does success look like for our North Side neighbors? Stormwater mitigation plans that include replacing the outdated infrastructure on Old Liberty. No parking variances in order to protect the townhomes on Daniels Drive, and thoughtful and safe traffic patterns for cars leaving and returning to the Middle Eight property. A reduction in the height and density of the project. Because Matt, I think you're right, there's some middle ground to be had here. As voters and resident stakeholders in Franklin, we need to know that the final iteration of the Middle Eight reflects the needs and concerns of those who already reside here. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Lori Hennon Bell. I live at 177 Lancaster Drive, and thank you for having us at this meeting today. I have great concerns about many things on this project, but mostly it is the building height. And I'm specifically talking about the multifamily building number 2, which is deemed to be 6 stories high. I found out at the last meeting that not 30 inches taller than Jameson Station, but actually 51 inches taller than Jameson Station. And though we understood from the tape measure that was presented, that was one tape measure. That didn't show you the scope of 288 feet of 51 inches of hardscape. That's significant when it's paired against Jameson Station, which also was a non-conforming building. So truly consider what this is going to look like if you're coming down Liberty Pike and if you're coming down Franklin Road, because you're going to see this mass, and it's going to probably even almost outweigh what your water tower, which is so prominently displayed now, looks like. So truly consider that as we're looking at the height of that building. And I'm hopeful that you, as our representatives, will still maintain your good stewardship of this historic town. We want to keep its beauty. We want to keep its character. I do hope you take this into consideration of all the comments that are being told to you by these neighborhood folks, because they're there all the time. Day in, day out, I walk by there at least twice a day. You probably see me with my dog. But if you let a building of this size be built, it will be an eyesore. It'll be your haven over by Factory.
And Laura, I brought the handouts, so they're going around with the height, which you can see from coming down Franklin Road and what it looks like at the height of the buildings. So I brought that. I thought you were going to speak about that. I'm all about height. But
You have to give
yes,
your name.
Oh, Thomas J. Bell. You called my name, 177 Lancaster Drive. I live with Lori. So I've been here several times. I've spoken several times. The height is an issue. I don't need to belabor that point. But this morning I sent a note regarding the information from the Heritage Foundation with regard to how historic this site was. And the other thing, has anyone ever made a mistake here? Has anyone, and I've heard it about the Haven, specifically about height. So mistakes can be made. And we need to be able to step back and say, let's take another look. We've got a Heritage Foundation that, again, I question them. Why aren't they represented on the Historic Zoning Commission? It's another voice. They have a totally different calling rather than development. But at the end of the day, if we rush through this, and that's what it seems to be, rush through, and we have a change to Envision Franklin amendment, we've got a new Envision Franklin, all the surveys, the factory district, 2-3 stories. We're at 6 stories. About historic character. What's historic about 6 stories in this town? There's nothing. There's nothing. Yet that's what the community, not just our community, but the entire community, all of the surveys say it. And yet no one's listening. We're pushing this through, ramming it through. And really, we feel bullied, quite frankly, because we get 2 minutes to speak as opposed to collectively going back and forth. So I sent the email this morning about the historic nature of that site with slavery and all of the other things. Juneteenth just happened. Knew nothing about it. But if that is the case, whether you want to argue it's the Battle of Franklin, there was a whole lead up to the Battle of Franklin. And there was a whole post-Battle of Franklin. That's history. So it may be, Mr. Antunovich, it may be 30 inches or 51 inches, but history is not measured by inches. It's by years, decades, and centuries. So let's erase that. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Margie Thesson. I am not a member, I don't live in the neighborhood. I live in Maplewood. We moved here in 1988 and moved to Maplewood, still live in the same house. And I have to say that it took me a lot longer to drive to town today than it did 35 years ago.
I'd hope
or even 5 years ago, because that's what's happening. The growth is getting exponential, And I see this project, and I see it, I agree with what folks have said with the size, the height, the density, but I see what's coming after that, because if you keep allowing variances, get a little higher, get a little denser, get a little bigger, then what's going to happen next? What's going to happen on Daniels Drive, the part where there are those little houses that people can afford? What's going to happen on Hooper Lane with those little houses? What's going to happen on Harpeth Industrial Court? More of the same. And what is that going to lead to? Even worse traffic than we have right now. Because traffic is, from a survey you did, the number one problem people complain about in Franklin. And I'm here to complain to you that traffic is a problem. I'm surprised nobody else has. And so what are you going to do about that? Are you going to widen Franklin Road, 4-lane it like Brentwood has done? And that's the end of the character of that gateway to Franklin. But you're just, no, we're not. We better not 4-lane that road, that beautiful rural country road, historic road. What about Liberty Pike? We could 4-lane that to the bypass. That would be great back and forth to town. And go through that neighborhood with all the children, with the elementary school, turn that into a raceway. You didn't even do that at Hillsborough Road. You didn't 4-lane that. I think it was for traffic slowing. And you're not going to do that on Liberty Pike either. So we don't have a solution to the traffic problem the way Franklin is set out. We just don't. And so what's going to happen? We're just going to have gridlock. We're going to have congestion. And we're not doing anything for the people who already live here. I'd like to hear about the walkability of this community. And that's great that you can walk across the street to the factory and get a cup of coffee,
finish up,
get a
please,
drink.
Margie.
I'm sorry?
Please finish up.
I will, 1 second. Can I continue about 15 more seconds? One of the things where people aren't going to walk? To work, to church, to the doctor, to the hospital. People are going to be driving all over this community. And so walkability is a great idea, but it's not going to work for this community. Thank you.
I apologize, I didn't put my note in. Am I able to speak for my 2 minutes?
Of course, we're going to let you speak.
Thank
If
you.
you'll just bring that to me after
I
you
sure
speak.
will.
2
And thank
minutes.
you so much for allowing us to be able to speak. Sir, I would like to tell you,
What's your name?
I'm so sorry.
Name?
I'm sorry, Carrie Braney. I live right down from Jameson Station. I live in the 4 3-story buildings facing this facility that they are wanting to build. And I want to tell you, first of all, sir, you guys did, a really great job on, the way this looks, and it looks, really like a great project. It's just not for this area. It's just, and the neighbors, all feel that, with the size and density of this particular development, it just doesn't fit our community. Is it a great, option? It's just not for this. I think it's easy for a lot of people who don't live, that they're not neighbors to this, really are not going to be able to relate to how it's going to impact us. I don't know the last time anybody's driven down to Spring Hill. You're in line, traffic like crazy. That's what this is going to be like. With the cars. Did anybody think too? You say you got like 30 extra places maybe for the shops and stuff. Well, what about when someone has guests and visitors? Where are they going to park? This is a huge concern to us.
If you'll address the board rather than the applicant, that's who you should be speaking to.
Okay, I apologize. So basically, with the density, the traffic, the height, when you show the plans, you don't see all 4 sides.
Okay, if you'll finish up.
Okay. Lastly, I just would like to thank the couple aldermen that did come out and listen to us. And then the last thing too is, we've lived here for 10 years and love Franklin, and you guys have done an amazing job
You'll go ahead and
at
finish up, please,
keeping,
ma'am.
yes, sir, keeping in with making this community what it is today. We're asking you to keep with your rules and standards
Thank you,
for
ma'am.
buildings, okay? Thank you so much.
Let me just clarify something for our citizens in the audience. We try to keep the meeting organized, and people bringing up speaker cards in the middle of the meeting is not something that I like. I just had somebody bring me up a long letter. The board has not been able to see this. I'm going to allow him to speak, though. I don't know who he is, but we will ask you to introduce yourself. I want to go with Mark. If you have not given me a speaker card, you better get one quick.
That's me right
Please.
there that you're holding.
I
I'm
know
Mark
Mark.
Driscoll, 162 Franklin Road. We are the neighborhood retention pond for this area. We're Liberty Creek. We're where the mouth feeds into Harpeth River. I've tried to get some information on the stormwater plans because my property, I'm afraid, is going to be the one that collects all of this runoff, and I need something to ensure that it's not going to cause increased flood elevations along Liberty Creek, my property, and the surrounding properties. I've been told that there's plans to slowly release 22 hours after an event, so on and so forth, but I don't know. I'm not an engineer. I have engaged an engineering firm that I'm going to have to assess this if I can get some information on it. I feel like it's important for me to have a professional look at it from my side of it. So I urge you to do the same thing, to make sure you get the facts on this. Facts are vital as we go forward with this. Also want to take a minute to address the attainable factor of this. I looked on Zumper.com, leading national rental site. The average rental for a studio apartment in Franklin this month is $1,775. We've been told that this will be priced at a premium to the Harpeth Square apartments. Harpeth Square apartments are priced at 53% higher than the Franklin average. That's what we're getting to. Anybody that will qualify to rent here will have to have a income of $108,630 a year for a studio apartment. It doesn't add up. I urge you, please pay attention to these facts. I know there's a lot of scientific data, there's a lot of facts here, but it's not adding up. I don't think that the grandkids are going to be coming back that are everybody's making just under $110,000 a year, and I certainly don't think the workers who are downtown, I don't think our shops are paying them $110,000 a year either. So it's really, really crucial that we really look at this, and I hope you'll pay attention to some of this data. Thanks.
Mr. Gillespie?
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to come in at this late hour time. My name's Wallace Gillespie. I live at 161 Lancaster Drive. I wish to say that we'll remember the old adage, you can't fit a round peg in a square hole. The location, the terrain, the access, the multitude of other negatives, the design parking in remote parking at best, we'll say, down under. Who wants to park, carry the groceries? The congestion, the multitudes. My name again is Wallace Gillespie. I live in this neighborhood, Williamson County, 50 years. My life work endeavor was serving as a builder, the planning and the building of structures, including structures that house people, families, children, and old folks like myself. A builder should always have an extra conscience, forethought, and care to design for the needs, for the weaknesses of people. Sure, you build it, and they'll come, they'll occupy it, and somehow we'll all survive. But this is not Franklin. Surely the planners can do better than this. Remember, the property is a square hole. This developer can force it. Obviously, he has a large hammer. but is this the best for Franklin? Vote the middle out, away. Thank you very much.
Tony Brandy, and I am not accepting any more speaker cards, so don't bring them back.
Thank you, I appreciate that. 24 Daniels Drive, I live right here.
Sir, you'll need to come to the microphone so we can hear you.
Yeah, I understand. A couple concerns, I reiterate, it's a non-conforming project. It violates 3 ordinances: height, density, and parking. So I think it's a little presumptuous for anybody developing here in Franklin to just come with their project and want to buck the system. That's why reiterate that point. That's the nature of this project. Second thing is, it's kind of like if you had a 3/4 ton pickup truck and you wanted to put 5 ton into the pickup truck, it's not going to go. If you look at Old Liberty, look how small that is. See how narrow that is? Has anybody ever, raise your hand if you've ever driven down
No,
Old
sir, we
Liberty.
don't do that.
Let me make my comment.
Don't address the audience and
I know,
ask
but
them
I'm
to raise their
making my
hand, or
point.
I'm going to ask you to quit and sit down.
Yeah, but can I make my point?
Make your point.
Okay.
We're not taking an audience
Right.
survey.
Even as it stands today, Old Liberty, it's almost impassable. It's too narrow. It's not like Daniels where I live. But here's the problem. You have such density in this middle 8 that people, as it is now, the traffic flow, people come from Franklin Pike and make a right at that traffic light and use Old Liberty as a thoroughfare. All right. And so what's going to happen is people exiting all these cars, right? All these residents, they won't be just exiting onto Liberty. They're going to be exiting onto Daniels. They don't show the street there on that plot plan. That plot plan's inaccurate, by the way. People will be turning right onto Daniels to egress out Old Liberty. That would be like putting 5 ton on a 3/4 ton pickup. Little
Thank you,
common
sir.
sense,
Your
you know?
time's up.
So you're going to have negligence. You're going to have a potential disaster, traffic accidents, pedestrian accidents. We can't even get by as it stands now. So you're going to add.
Thank you, sir. Your time is
253
up.
cars. All right. Thank you.
Item 3, City of Franklin Contract 2023-0095 with 228 Franklin LLC for Parkland Impact Fee.
So much misinformation. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I think Lisa's coming up, but this applies your parkland dedication standards to it. I think we've identified which is about $1.18 million, and I think there's about $591,000 of allowable offset from improvements they're making that benefit and provide parkland-type benefits. So, Lisa, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so it's just private offsets in this, so 50% they are eligible to receive.
But how much land is that? It looked like 6,000 square feet and 4,500 square feet or something like that, and they're going to get $590,000.
They are
They're going to do some things too.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Describe the improvements.
Sure. So right now, what they're proposing is 2 private courtyards.
Two
and
private courtyards, yes.
2 private courtyards at $295,900 apiece. And so those are all the improvements within those from the recreational amenities. It'll be more just a passive for their residents. And so 50% is offset based on the 275 dwelling units they're proposing.
Okay, anybody else?
They're both real small.
Yes, ma'am.
Real small.
Just go ahead.
Yes. You just want to go?
Anybody else?
Oh,
If you need to take a potty break, please go ahead and we'll continue on.
thanks, I will.
Item 4 is Franklin Contract 2023-0172 with the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation American Rescue Plan Act for the non-competitive grant award of $4,679,357.36.
So we've talked to you a couple times before previously about the opportunity for grant dollars that are American Rescue Plan dollars flowing through the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. We have submitted those for the TDEC's approval. Those have come back to us with a specific grant award and contract, and it's roughly a 65% grant with the city providing the other match. It's in the water and sewer and stormwater categories, and we'll walk you through those briefly. And we do have this on both meetings tonight, so we can get the contract executed and move forward with these as quickly as possible.
We did want to, Eric did a great summation of what this contract is for. We did in the spring do an update, a staff update on the both of the American Rescue Plan programs. This is what we refer to as the TDEC ARPA program. The two largest projects in this program are a Liberty Hills stream restoration project, which this board has acted upon. There's also a variety of water and sewer fund projects, one of which is the Spencer Creek Pump Station Rehab project. So there's total projects of just under $7.2 million, of which 65% is this grant amount, and then the balance 35% is city funds, both from the water and sewer fund as well as the grant match on the stream restoration project.
Lewisburg's on that, correct?
That is
from the direct.
That's actually on the direct ARPA
Direct,
program.
okay.
It's still in the American Rescue Plan, but it's in the program.
The local allocation.
That was the direct allocation, but that's just a good clarification that there's moving parts between the two American Rescue Plan programs. There is also another American Rescue Plan program through TDEC that we are in the process of preparing applications. It's called the Competitive Grant Program, and staff is working on applications that are due by August the 8th. So we had told you that those details hadn't been announced yet, but now we know that we have through August 8th to apply for additional funds under the TDEC program.
Alderman Potts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just, and I apologize, I was trying to pull this up. Would you just remind us with that Liberty Hills stream restoration, what the total cost was, if you have that available, and what the city is paying versus what the Liberty Hills is paying?
Yes.
Approximately.
Yes. What we submitted for the Liberty Hills stream restoration is a $2 million project cost. 65% of that coming from the grant. There would be a city match of 35%, which is $700,000. And that is being recommended to be funded from a transfer from our general fund, because we just don't have the fund reserves within the stormwater fund.
And how much of that was the Liberty Hills HOA going to cover?
That was not, this program does not allow a subrecipient type arrangement. We had advised that would be a city responsibility, but that would be the only way to go into this program, is if the city assumed responsibility for that 35%.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Item 5, Resolution 2023-19, adopting the Fourth Amendment of the City of Franklin amended and restated Employees Pension Plan dated effective as of January 1st, 2018, increasing the lump sum threshold to $25,000 for terminated vested participants.
And this is a recommendation from our Employee Pension Committee, their spring meeting in March. Staff had discussed with the Employee Pension Committee a recommendation to increase what is referred to as the lump sum threshold for terminated vested participants. What that really relates to is in our closed pension plan. Those are employees that were hired before the end of 2016. Once they have been employed for 5 years, they become vested. Of course, the plan is closed, so all of our current employees who are in the closed plan are vested. But if those employees choose to resign their employment before they retire, reach retirement in that plan, there is a valuation done of their the current value of their future benefits in that closed plan. Of course, people can leave many, many years before they reach retirement age, and those values can be fairly small. And this plan since 2016 has had a threshold of $15,000 in which those folks who, as they exit employment, may decide to pull out that balance, and they can primarily they'll roll that into a retirement program at their new employer. But what we are asking is to increase that from $15,000 to $25,000. Certainly, employees who are leaving employment now who are less than $25,000 would be able to have an option to roll that value into a new retirement plan at a new employer. It would also allow us. There's about 31 former employees who are currently between the $15,000 and the $25,000 that our HR department can reach out to and ask, would you like to roll that amount into another retirement program? Many of them are still, even though they're no longer employees here, they're still 25, 30 years away from reaching age 65. Many of them have new employers, and they have new retirement programs that they may like to roll that into. There is also a benefit to the city because it is a closed plan. If there are former employees who would like to roll those benefits out, even though they're fairly small benefits, those are less persons that many years from now that the plan will be administering benefits to. So it would apply to both people who be resigning employment today, potentially, as well as ones in the past that their benefits are not greater than $25,000.
How many people do we have in the closed plan? I don't know.
There are still around 400, but it's 400 active participants. It's still over half of our active employees are in the closed plan, but that's really a pretty significant change over the last, almost 7 years. So, a group of 31 is not a large group, but modernizing that amount on that lump sum threshold, there has been precedent for that. It was $10,000 until 2016. The board increased that to $15,000, and we're just asking to increase that to $25,000 here in 2023.
Item 6, amendment number 3 to City of Franklin Contract 2019-0007 with Reese Farms LLC for Parkland Amtrak Fee and Greenway Trail System Construction Agreement for Reese Farm. Change in owner only.
We're just changing the name of the counterparty. Yeah.
Very detailed presentation,
Yeah, well,
Lisa. Thank you.
Sometimes that's all you need.
How about item number 7, contract number 2021-0119 with Franklin Special School District for the interlocal agreement for the Freedom Ball Fields?
Yes, sir. So thank you. We've, as you know, we've opened up that great facility, and several of y'all were able to attend that. And so we've worked with the Franklin Special School District, with Dr. Stone and Dr. Esslinger on this contract to make sure that we understand each party's responsibilities for this great facility. And so the contract lays out each of those areas. It was a joint effort, and so tonight we bring it before you, and then Dr. Snowden and Dr. Esslinger will take it before their own board as well in July. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, item number 8 is discussion of the Creekside property.
Can we go ahead and pull that up? That'd be great. All right, so I'd like to walk you through this, and I really need guidance from the board in terms of how you want to proceed related to this. A few months ago, a group called the Franklin Preservation Partners contracted for the property along Franklin Road. Let's go to the next slide. And so we have what they have contracted for that property for. We have the general area and how that might work. And so what I want to present to you tonight is a general framework from conversations I have had. This is not a deal that's been agreed to, but it is a concept. And I need the board to give me guidance on if you want me to continue on your behalf, and our staff team to continue on your behalf to flesh this out further within something similar to this framework. So that's my purpose tonight, to kind of walk you through how I understand it and how those pieces might fit together, and then get guidance from you on how you want to, or if you want to proceed with continuing to figure that out. The other element is there has been at least some work done by members of the Friends of Franklin Parks to sort of brainstorm what could happen around these areas. It's a concept. It's certainly not the only concept. And I may hand that over to Alderman Brown. I think has been at least in some communication with those folks to maybe talk a little more about that. So this is the existing property layout. Property 1 on the screen is the city's existing roughly 53 acres owned by our water utility right along Mac Hatcher, and that connects just a little bit on the south to Harlansdale Farm. The section 2 on this map is the First United Methodist Church property, and then 3 and 4 represent what we refer to as the Creekside property. Let's go to the next slide. Breaking that breaks it as we get to it, and that segments out a couple things that will be of interest as we talk about this. Section 2 is referred to as kind of the racetrack property. This is the property that is owned by part of the First United Methodist Church property. It has the historic racetrack on it. It also has a historic home on it as well. So that's around 33 acres of property there, adjacent to our 53 acres of currently owned city property, and directly adjacent to the north of Harlansdale Farm, the park at Harlansdale Farm. So then 3 is the remainder of the existing First United Methodist Church property, and then we're starting to segment out the property that's in Creekside. The area immediately west of Franklin Road, adjacent to the First Methodist property that's part of Creekside. That's item 4 that we're looking at there. And then you start to segment out the balance of the Creekside property on the east side. What's designated as 7 is the actual homestead of the Creekside historic home there and property surrounding it. And then property along Franklin Road and then further east that comprise the balance of Creekside. So this potentially could be an addition of ownership to the city when you put the racetrack property adjacent to our 53 acres, create sort of a northern extension of the park at Harlansdale Farm. That's the concept there. So you'd potentially have city acquiring property from the church rolling those proceeds essentially with some additional money from the church into purchasing segment 4, which is the area adjacent to their property and immediately west of Franklin Road. So that would be part of that transaction potentially. And then the private ownership, the group would sell off the Creekside property in a private transaction, and then the balance of the property potentially acquired by the city for preservation, potential additional park and trail use down the line. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so these are some numbers, again, that I have tried to pull together to work back to the number that the preservation partners have contracted this property for, $9 million. They had shared with me that there are additional carrying costs, assuming that this goes to the end of the calendar year for completion. So those are really not fully reflected here, but that's another consideration. So I've worked back from that. I've used our parkland ordinance assumption per acre of 45,000 for property that is in the floodplain for those properties that fit that definition. And then I've used a number that gets us to where we would end up with meeting the requirement to kind of keep this whole for preservation partners at some level here. So when you walk through that, it has the city essentially spending funds for the acquisition of the racetrack property, and that's at just about saying that right? Just a little over $2 million. Let me pull this up so I can see this a little better. 2.5 million. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
My apologies. So it would acquire that from the church, and then acquire the balance of the property on the east side is also reflected there, dividing that up between floodplain property and non-floodplain property. At the end of the day, you have the city and potentially investing around $6 million for the acquisition of these properties, the sale of, we made an assumption about the sale of the Creekside property in this deal as well, that essentially keeps this back to about the $9 million cost that the original contract reflected. Again, we know there are some carrying costs that's not reflected here totally. But this gives you a framework of acquiring these properties, providing the city with the opportunity to control it, also adding on to Harlansdale Farm on the west side, and then providing the opportunity to control and preserve property on the east side of Franklin Road. So what I provide you here is really a framework from those conversations. It's not a deal. It's not even a recommendation. I need you to help give me guidance on if you're interested in pursuing this further and figuring this out. I think Alderman Brown may want to talk a little bit about some of the conceptual ideas that have come from some brainstorming with the Friends of Franklin Parks group, a subgroup there that has looked at it. I'll hand it over to him, and glad to answer any questions from there. And
Do you want to hit that last slide?
go to the last slide. I'm not sure what's on the last
There you
slide.
go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What are we going to do with this?
So yeah, this gives you just some financial sources, options, concepts here. Obviously, you've got cash capacity within your general fund. It's around by policy, you make available cash above 45% of reserves. That's roughly around $31 million. Elements of that are already programmed within our CIP, but that is a dollar amount that has in recent years grown over time. So there's some potential capacity there. You've got funding within the hotel motel tax. We've been pretty conservative in what we have projected in budgets from that source. So there is a potential opportunity within that component. Parkland dedication, of course, provides an option as well within that quadrant for the potential of acquiring new parkland there. We did do some math related to just if you took that $6 million acquisition and you did a very typical general obligation debt with our AAA bond rating, we would say it would make sense to probably amortize that over 10 years for a property acquisition. So that would put you roughly at about $700,000 per year over a 10-year period to make that acquisition if you decided to do that. Put that in context. That is a penny of property tax is about $750,000. So it's a little bit less than what a penny of property tax equates to. We're not saying that that's necessarily how you would need to do that, but it just puts it in context of what that would cost and how that would play into a potential funding strategy if we added that, say, to the general obligation debt that we expect to happen within the next year. So that is an option for you as well, along with these other potential elements. We're going to talk to you in July about kicking off our CIP review, capital investment program review. So this could be part of those considerations as well. But we know there's some timeframes that the preservation partners are working under. We know there's just some other considerations here. So I'm looking for your feedback and guidance on that. I'll let Mac talk a little more about the other elements there.
Thank you, Eric. I'm actually ask Adam to come up as well, but just kind of think about this a little bit as two parts and what I'm going to have Adam show. The first part of this potential for acquisition of this space really just addresses what we've heard both in the Envision Franklin and the citizen survey. Top of the list is preserving open space. So in and of itself, this does this on a very important gateway and an important rural entryway into the city. But actually has the potential to do much more than that. From cross-country trails and being able to actually host those types of events here that are currently up in Hendersonville and down in Atlanta. But also any number of sort of activities to sort of activate not only the city property, but the property around it. And then even further than that, a very realistic path for us reaching Roper's Knob is also attainable. This being phase one, a phase two, and then we are now hiking pretty close to Roper's Knob here, or Roper's Knob. So what I would like Adam to do is just kind of share some thinking that has happened on the Friends of Franklin Parks side. I would be really, I'm going to really ask this favor, which is please do not, don't get hung up in the plan or what the idea is that came out of that workshop. Any number of things can happen here programmatically. But I think it's important to share the types of vision that we could have here. And if we can do this type of stuff, we can do anything in this space. And it's just a way of being able to share with the board as you think about preserving this space, really for the community. How could we maybe use it? How might we be able to actually monetize it? How might we be able to better our community with it? And so, again, don't get hung up on the proposed use here. It's not the plan, but it is an idea and it is a plan. It is a workable plan. But I really want you to just think about it as in that context. So appropriate setup for you, I hope, and you can take it from there.
I think I know everybody, but Hi, I think I know everybody, but my name's Adam Balish, and tonight I'm here on behalf of Friends of Franklin Parks and the chair of the Riverwalk and Trails Committee portion of Friends. I think most of you all know, and we certainly appreciate the opportunity to have what I believe is still the single memorandum of understanding with a nonprofit and our ability to work so closely with the city. And on behalf of Tori and Jay and other board members that are here tonight, we certainly appreciate that. We have become aware of the Preservation Partners project for some time. Through the Riverwalk and Trails Committee, we are often looking at areas around town and looking at where there are shortcomings or needs, and whether that's helping identify sidewalks or helping long-term look at the parkland and trails needs. On our monthly committee meetings, any of you all are welcome to attend. There are city staff members that attend those, as well as a lot of folks from the public. So I feel sometimes somewhat hypocritical standing up here as a developer, and certainly appreciate the first couple hours of this meeting and the challenges that you guys go through on a daily basis. But I think this is an opportunity to hopefully get a win and continue getting wins for the city of Franklin. So what was asked of the Riverwalk and Trails Committee and the opportunity that we jumped on was an opportunity to brainstorm and envision, if you will, what a green corridor could look like along MacHatcher. And obviously, what you'll see on the slide that's in front of you is very little focus on the intersection of Franklin Road and MacHatcher. And I know there's a lot of gateways into Franklin, and that term gateway probably continually shifts as the town changes. But we do think that there's an opportunity to preserve corridors. And not only are there opportunities to preserve view sheds, but to expand on those corridors in somewhat unique manners, if that's through greenways or blueways and things of that nature. So what you see on the screen here is it was an opportunity to envision these various properties that Eric kind of mapped out earlier on the color-coded scheme. It does incorporate some properties that the city already owns, as well as some of the properties that are in discussion now. But obviously, and I keep turning my head to look at the screen and feel like I'm losing my voice, but it builds upon the opportunity to expand upon Harlansdale. And Harlansdale has often been referred to as Franklin Central Park. And from that, we've seen a lot of radiating trails, whether that be through the recent expansion on Chestnut Bend. But now we start looking at an opportunity to expand the trail network, call it east-west along Spencer Creek, but also linking back out to MacHatcher and creating a broader connection through those properties. And so one of the things that Matt mentioned is, potentially the long-term goal of gaining access back over to Roper's Knob and to the properties that are already owned by the city and the county, or I'm sorry, city and the state, and how the educated and thoughtful decisions by this board today and days coming could help potentially continue to grow these resources for our community moving forward. I believe there is a slide towards the back of this, Eric, or whoever's controlling the screen, that speaks towards the trail components. And then I can kind of go back and hit on some of these other zoomed in highlights. Yes, sir. And so the various color-coded schemes that you'll see there start off with, I believe, a 2-mile route, a 5K, an 8K, and a 10K. I don't know if, contrary to what I think, my kids might not sign me up for a 10K anytime soon, but it's pretty cool to see the opportunity to have those various courses run through this property. Currently, from research that our group has done, Williamson County Schools do not have a facility within the county to host cross-country meets and trails. So although Harlansdale today is primarily used for equestrian and dog park activities, this is an opportunity to continue to expand upon those uses and attract more people to this area. Not only do we think that could be ultimately a location and home for some county activities, but could be developed in a manner that may become more of a statewide or regional asset as well for larger tournaments and uses that we think could be kind of a source of pride for the city. And then the other two slides that are in this deck really just kind of show a zoomed in version of the west and east side of Franklin Road. The east side being shown as what could be an arboretum and coordinating the access with the proposed rebuilding, if you will, or preservation of the Creekside Manor, and working with city staff obviously closely to make sure that we're following an ingress and egress pattern that meets traffic needs at this intersection. This is one of what could be a multitude of ideas, but I think is an opportunity to paint a picture to the board as they see dollars and cents and just property outlines about what could potentially be on these properties. Likewise, the properties that we have outlined on the west show kind of a continuation of the expansion of equestrian uses at Harlansdale. Harlansdale currently is encumbered in a very thoughtful manner by a land trust easement that prohibits new buildings constructed. That also includes the ability to build stalls to host horses overnight for larger events that may have a demand there on campus. And so in this plan, one option is to consider out of the floodplain in some areas that the city already owns, what would that look like if buildings were constructed in that location for housing of the horses. And I think the other areas that are shown in a light green are more paddocks and fencing, and recognizing that that's floodplain and floodway and not encumbering those areas really any different than what's already at Harlansdale. And then obviously kind of building out of continued infrastructure inside what is that historic raceway. There's other folks in our team that can speak much more intelligently than I can as it relates to the equestrian options, but this is just one option, and I'm sure there's others that the board has been approached with or aware of over time, whether that's children's museums or various other things, but obviously helps hopefully paint a picture of some options here. So the last thing I'll mention that we want to make sure that the board is aware of as an option, if they so choose, in giving Eric some direction to push these conversations forward, is that when Friends was created a decade or more ago, it was really done in a manner to hopefully privately grow public spaces. And so unlike the land trust, where a lot of times conservation easements are placed on private property, there's a lot of us that may never set foot on those properties, as beautiful and as preserved as they are. So one of the models that we have been looking very closely at is what has been done with Franklin's Charge, and how has Franklin's Charge set up as a conduit for land preservation to help promote battlefield reclamation and that tourism. In what manner could Friends serve in that role as it relates to preservation of park space and continued promotion of that? So as the board, if they choose to give direction to Eric, if that is an option that you all wanted to consider, we'd be happy to have those conversations with with finance and Eric's staff to understand if we can help serve as a conduit to defray some initial CIP costs that may otherwise, have some immediate impact on your budgets that you may not have previously considered. So happy to answer any questions, but like I said, it was more of a visioning session and hopefully a way to break the ice and show some options that could be done out there.
Do you want to finish up, Alderman Brown? Or do you? Well, what I was going to suggest, if the board felt comfortable, is just give your initial reaction and just start with the vice mayor and go down the line if that's acceptable.
That's acceptable. What is our goal is to acquire property number 2, right? That's the city's goal.
5 and 6.
2, 5, and 6.
You already own 1.
You already own 1.
2 is the racetrack property.
Two is the church, belongs to the church.
Yep.
So we were looking at acquiring property number 2, and the church then would purchase property number 4.
Correct.
Okay. And we're going to buy 5 and 6.
So 7 would be the Creekside
7 is
Manor.
the creek-
That would be
is-
sold privately, and then the balance of the property on the east side, 5 and 6 would be also potentially city acquired. Sorry.
Because, I mean, I don't remember, but because this has been a while, but I don't remember me looking at 5 and 6. I looked at 2 and said, that's a good fit. Because that's Harlandale and that's the 53 acres that's next to it. That makes a good fit there and for us. So when did 5 and 6 come in? Did it come in has it been there forever?
Well, the Creekside property itself is 4, 5, 6, and 7. And so the preservation partners put that property as a whole under contract. And then some discussions happened around these various pieces and how they might fit together. 5 and 6 are the balance of that east side. 4 has a clear potential use for the church and their campus. And I think the church is willing to talk to us about the racetrack. So it's just 5 and 6 are kind of the balance of this whole property that is on the east side that, that's what's being looked at. And you do have some other property on the east side that you might ultimately down the line be able to connect to, be it Roper's Knob or other areas there that are sort of open space today, how that might be part of a broader approach.
And the estimate is, what was it, 9 million and something?
Let me pull that up. The total contract they have for the property is $9 million. And their stated goal is to be whole at the end of all this. And so I've essentially summarized those pieces, used parkland as a guide related to the floodplain property. And then, quite frankly, looked at the balance as how we best get there and allocate those costs amongst these different parcels.
What's the total acreage on 2, 5, and 6?
Let's see, 2, 5, and 6 are around 80 acres, something like that.
So it's 34 and whatever that.
Yeah, maybe,
5 and
yeah,
6.
yeah.
Okay. I
76, I guess.
I don't think I've satisfied my concern, but I think I more understand where my concern is. And that's 9.5 million plus whatever the interest rate is on that 9.5 million that they've had under, in some area where they're having to pay the interest on that 9.5 million, or they're losing their investment interest off of that. So it's not 9.5 even now. It'll be greater than that. And because I was looking at this at one time, and I said, if we want to do this, I'm fine with 2. Church gets their money, they buy 4, and I wasn't looking at 5 and 6. I probably should have been looking at 5 and 6 also. So that's sort of where I'm at on this right here. I don't have a problem with 2. You said, it's interesting that you said what you said, and I'm going to deviate just a little bit from this. You said there's $31 million in reserve.
Well, that's, yeah, if you take your policy of 45% above that, it's around 31 million. Yeah.
It's $31 million. If I take some capital improvements projects that we've got looking at now that haven't gotten to completion yet, we're looking at $31 million somewhere, 30 million out of reserves for just one project in this location right here. Because we said we would bond 70, we'd borrow 70. The project cost is at 99. When it was 85, we were going to pull 15 million out of reserves at that particular time, and now that's no longer the case because it's gone to 99 million. We could rapidly use up our reserves at 45%. I don't think that's going to happen because I think that the board will stop that from happening before it gets there. But I would be concerned about 9 million and the fact that we're doing what we're doing, because I don't have a problem, like I said, with two. Two is logical. 4 for the church, that's logical. 7's private sale, that's logical. 5 and 6, maybe illogical, I'm not sure. But I've said enough. I'm okay with what I've said. I think I've made my point.
Alderman Peterson.
Kind of interesting, I don't have any.
Nothing to add at this time. Alderman Hanson.
Love the idea of the preservation of that corner. I love it. I have concerns in the economy that we're in that we would be spending reserves when we're trying to take on a $100 million City Hall project. So for me, the timing is a concern. I do like the idea of adding space 2. I do see why the church would want space 4, kind of with Alderman or Vice Mayor Barnhill with 5 and 6, maybe if it could be a delayed purchase and we don't extend ourselves that much somehow. That's my only concern. It's just too much too soon.
Alderman Potts.
Thank you, sir. I look at this and I recognize and hear what you're saying as far as timing right now. Sorry if you can't hear me. I understand the timing part of it, but I don't think there's ever an opportunity where timing is always perfect. I have very strong concern and focus for preservation, and I feel like this is one of those opportunities where we can do this, and we need to move the conversation forward. I think that there is great opportunity right here, and we've talked about this ongoing again and again about Roper's Knob and how we look at certain projects and we get concerned and say, man, that one right there, that one's maybe too close to our hillside. And this is an opportunity where we can actually preserve this space, at least on one side of it, and move this forward. So I love the idea for the trail expansion on both sides of the road. I love the idea for preserving the historic racetrack. I think that there's an opportunity for us to celebrate a recognized female horse racer there. And I think that this is also a good addition. I don't think cross-country, we need to limit ourselves from cross-country. I think that there's a lot of great opportunity to expand what we're currently doing at Harlansdale as far as having youth out there and sports, and just I think that there's some great opportunity right there. So, Eric, your question is do we want to move this forward? And from my side, I would say yes. I definitely want to extend the conversation.
Alderman Berger.
Oh, well, I'm almost saying no comment, but if I do, I know you'd probably wish I would say no comment, wouldn't you? I'm sure you would right now, because I'm probably the one on this board that has the most problems with this. All I see is it taking it right off the tax dollars again. More land taking off our tax dollars, taking off the tax rolls. We have 80, what's Harlansdale, how many acres? 40? No, 200.
It's about 200 acres.
Yeah, I think it's 40. About 200 acres, which we took off the tax dollars. Great, we put that to great use. We've done great things. Friends of Franklin Park's been a great partner. A lot of things to be proud about there. Do you want to preserve that corner? Absolutely. It's really important. I don't deny that corner is really important. Preservation is really important. I agree with you, Alderman Potts. but we have a few things coming down the pike that's going to come to us, and we're going to have to make some decisions, and there's some opportunities to really generate some dollars in our city. It's going to take some dollars to do that in the future coming to us, but how do we monetize this? I don't see how we do that. Going to take it off the tax rolls, 80 acres. Probably it's not going to be developed, which is okay if you want to preserve the land, which is great. I don't, number 2 seems very feasible because you're extending Harlansdale Farm. And I would totally support number 2 because we will extend the farm right into that. If somebody wants to step up to the plate and donate a lot of money, I mean, people raise money to save the theater. Let's raise some money to save the land and not take it out of the city coffers. Let's not do it. We have done remarkable things in this town. People are very giving in this town. Let's put it out to the people. Let's put a thermometer out front like the nonprofit does, you know, to raise money. Let's do something. Let's raise money in our community. Let's put that out front in our square. Let's do that out front of City Hall. Let's raise some money to buy these properties with if we want to. It's not just the purchase of the property, though. Even if we did get the money donated to get it, and we have to upkeep it, and we have to develop it into the different aspects of the ideas that you have, Adam and Matt and Patrick, whatever y'all are thinking about to do with that property. We have long-term commitment, money-wise, once you buy a property. And the biggest thing is taking it off the tax rolls again, across the street from 200 acres that we already have off the tax rolls. That's my problem. Am I for preserving the land? Absolutely. Bring me an idea, how do we do that without taking it 9 million or whatever out of the city roll, tax, city bank or the city money? Then I really would listen to it. But I think number 2, I would ask that we find some way to do number 2 and expand the park there across the street. Got to come up with a better idea because I don't see it. I'm not trying to be the Debbie Downer here, but it's just I'm looking at it really monetarily, and I'm looking down the pike to see some other things that are going to be coming to the city that we're really going to need to look at that will generate more money. But we're going to have to step up to the plate and do a few things. And we have City Hall, and we had a $100 million water treatment plant. We've got a lot of things on our plate, and I don't know how we stretch ourselves very thin when we have an opportunity to maybe go out and raise the funds. And I wouldn't be totally opposed to that.
Alderman Baggett.
Thank you. First of all, we have heard what the people want, and I think we're the basis, public outreach we did for Envision Franklin Citizen Survey has said they want to preserve rural character. Not only do they want to preserve rural character, they have put sticky dots on the locations they want to preserve. Do you all remember that? I mean, I think everyone remembers that. This was where most of the sticky dots were. The same public outreach that staff is using to craft the future of our city. All the sticky dots that you all put on this map, you also put them right on top of this property. And you said, we don't want it developed. That means something to me, and I think it means something to staff, because that's what we're crafting our entire land use plan off of. 2, it's not $9 million, it's $6 million in this model. So anybody thinking it's $9 million, well, just right now, it's not $9 million. Okay, that's the bottom number. The top number is what we're talking about, $6 million. Third, I love the fact that there seems to be some consensus that number 2 makes sense. So let's start there. And I see heads nodding. Like I think we kind of, and I heard Alderman Barnhill say, I think there's some consensus there. So let's start there. The next thing I'll say is McMahon House, and you tell me how all these correlate. McMahon House, historic racetrack, Creekside and Roper's Knob. We just heard from our historic preservation organization, which I appreciate them coming in. You're going to knock out 4 major historic preservation, 2 antebellum homes that are not currently preserved. 2 of our oldest antebellum homes, not currently preserved, Creekside and the McMahon House. Knocks it out with this. Gets it in our control, not threatened by development. Roper's Knob, if you will pull up will you pull that document I just sent you? And then I'm gonna get to the finances. We have an opportunity. Our population is going to double, so we're told, in the next, how many years? 10, 15? Other than Southeast Park, which was a wise decision by this board to acquire land before we needed it, we wouldn't have Southeast Park if this board had not had the forethought enough to buy the land without a specific, they knew we'd put the water treatment plant down there, but they didn't know it was going to be a park. What you see right here, you see all that land, this is everything in blue is what we own. It's similar to what you just saw, okay? We own that down there in the bottom right. Guess what's in between the bottom right blue and the top Creekside blue? That's hillside overlay. You can't build anything in it. There's not going to be anything built in that in between. We have and the rest up there in the corner doesn't have blue, that's floodplain. It's not going to be built in. You saw it on the other map. What you begin to see is a vision, a long-term vision. Now, granted, we're not going to program this next year, but we can make an actual step into creating a park with our population doubling, and we have Southeast Park. And then where does our ratio go? We've got to have some forethought. This is on the precipice of Cool Springs. We were told 2 weeks ago, 1,500 units within walking distance of this right here. 1,500 units. How much parkland dedication fees are those? Millions. I'll tell you this on the finances. There are ways we can do this. I'm involved with Franklin's charge. It is possible. The interest rate environment makes it difficult, but it's still possible. And I think with this board's support of this, the idea that we could have a natural park, this isn't all going to happen in 5 years, okay? $700,000, a penny in sales tax. We have seen in the last 2 meetings about 3 over budget items that would equal 7 or 8 pennies in sales tax. Okay, so this whole idea that this is going to raise our taxes, I just patently, that is not right. You presented I'm going to settle down a little bit, but the idea that this would raise our property tax a penny when we're $3.5 million over budget in our sales tax collection just for this year, that's half the cost of what we would have to invest here. And Mayor, I see you down there. I know.
And that wasn't a proposal to do that. It's an equivalency. It's to give you right.
It's scope. And I understand that. And that was not I think.
I know. I just want to make sure
we all need to understand that this is not coming with a sales tax increase. There's just a perspective. Mm-hmm. But I will close with this: is we have. This is kind of weird that I'm getting emotional about this, but there's very, very few things we can do in this as we sit up here. Guess what? They're going to tear down City Hall one day. They're going to replace every sewer line, every single one of them. We got 4 historic properties, and we got 85 acres that will be prevented from being developed forever. You divide that by infinity, it's pretty dang cheap. Pretty dang cheap, because that will never be developed. I'm telling you, you guys want to leave a mark? This is it.
I appreciate your energy and enthusiasm, Alderman Baggett. I was not eager for you to quit. I thought good comments.
I'm not eager to follow it.
And I'm never coming before him.
I normally think I can talk pretty well, but man, when you get fired up, man, that's good. Well, I will double down on everything you just said, but I'm going to add also this and a couple clarifications as well. Look, we have a very generous community. We do. We have more nonprofits in this community than most places. We have a lot of people in this community who have given a lot of money to preserving our community, expanding our community, growing it, making it better. At some point, though, when the citizenry is saying we want preserved open space and they stick or dot an area, at some point they're also looking at their board of mayor and aldermen and their city government to say, we're not just focused on growth and development, we're willing to step in there and make a purchase to preserve some open land too. And we have that ability to do that. And I think it responds well. To be honest with you, I wish all the Middle Eight people were still here. I'm disappointed they all walked out because on one hand, we're concerned about high density in an area. On the other hand, we're sitting in here talking about preserving huge open space on the same corridor. And I wish they were in here to hear that we also have the ability to do that. And we have a passion to do that. And we will protect our city. It may not be in that spot, but it can be right down the road on the entranceway into all this. I do want to make a note on number 4 real quick. There will be some easements on that property. So when we talk about the church buying that property, just know there will be some conservation easements. It's not like that'll just build up into a building. There will be some open space protected as part of that as well. On 5 and 6, look, I'm glad everybody's thrilled with 2. I think the fact that the church is working with us with that and so grateful for them because I think that is a great thing for our city to get to. But you gotta really, you can't think about 5 and 6 as the afterthought, as and we also get, and also this other part over here. You have to look at 5 and 6 and the bigger vision of Roper's Knob and that entire area and this northern extension of Harlansdale. And I will remind people, I wasn't actually here for it, but I have heard the stories in detail. The people weren't real thrilled about buying Harlansdale either. In fact, there was a lot, I'm sorry, I didn't, well, you know.
You weren't here, don't talk about it.
But people fought it. And I think we all love that we have it. Sometimes you just got to have some vision. You got to listen to what people are asking for, and we got to step out there and do something good for our city. Maybe it does mean there's something that we don't do on our CIP. Maybe there's some other more creative ways. I think there's a lot of ways to do this. But I think, Eric, you got to go forth and conquer.
Whoa, I won't have this much passion. I will say that it's interesting as you reflect back, both Harlansdale and the Eastern Flank were met with heavy contention. And there's still some people who are butthurt that they lost their golf course. And I see them often. But if you look back now and you think about, it's like anything you do. Sometimes you got to take the risk and you hope it pays off. But in this case, I think that we're a community that is celebrated for a lot of different reasons, and one of them is our view sheds and the way we preserve and protect. And so I say go forth and prosper. I will tell you also, I was sent some information from an undisclosed source that says 1,500 residential units equals $6.456 million in parkland dedication fees.
That's accurate.
So it's accurate. So, there are ways to skin the cat.
And one more thing. Well, I'm sorry. Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, I want to.
They showed the equestrian idea, which certainly we know the financial impacts that equestrian events can have in our community. But to all the pickleball people out there, to all the tennis, there's so many options we can talk about. There are possible ways that the city property we already own, there could be actual financial impacts to our city, but we have to get there. Thanks, Mayor.
One more thing.
I've got Alderman Vice Mayor here, and then I'll get you Alderman Berger, then I want to make a comment.
Okay.
Well, one correction, we're not doubling in population in the next 10 years. That's not what's happening.
Thank God.
Okay? We may double in the next 30 or 40 years or whatever, but we're not doubling in the next 10. That's number one. And number two, I want to understand how so the church will deal with, for the property, number 4. The city has nothing to do with that, right?
Correct.
We're not in the deal.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Alderman Berger?
Sorry. So, I'm never speaking before you, Patrick, because I know how to get you excited with something passionate here. Let me be clear. First of all, I want to save this property. I'm not against not saving this property. We've heard, one of you said, we've heard what the people want with all the stickies. Yeah, we heard what the people wanted over on the east side too, and yet we lost Taproot Farm. 5 of us in this board voted for Taproot Farm. No regard. But I have to let that go because it's water under the bridge. So we want to save it. Let's raise them at $6 million to save it. That can be done. How about this? How about if I just say, right tonight, community, why don't you bring us $3 million? Call us up tomorrow. We'll take your check, $3 million, and then maybe the city matches it or something. I mean, we should be open to doing different things, right? But I would say that whatever we do over here, it has to be an active park. It can't just be an open park where you can't put anything down. You can't put pavilions down like Harlansdale. You can't do anything. It's all open space. It's all, what do you call it? Active. We have to have an active park. I mean, we have to do these things, pickleballs, all these things. All those things are needed. So if we look at that and we really want to go and do that, that makes so much more sense. Again, I'm not against this. I just want to make sure that we need help raising this money. The community is out there. They put the stickers on the board, put the check in the mail.
109 3rd Avenue South, Franklin, Tennessee,
37064.
And Mayor, if I may interject just one
Make a
moment.
note on the check what it's for.
I may not have done a good job earlier highlighting this, but I think one of the reasons why Matt asked me to speak today was to make sure the board was aware of our interest in helping contribute towards that. And so what Eric has shown here is a scenario where 100% of the costs are borne by the city. And I think, if Eric is given the ability to continue conversations, there's an opportunity for organizations such as Friends of Franklin Parks to help participate in some of the land preservation as a whole. So we would welcome an opportunity at that table for future discussions there.
And I don't want us to forget that once this land's bought, the city takes care of it. Cost a lot of money to take care of our parks. And the money just doesn't fall off of trees. And you guys can't stand alone. That's why I said to the community, put the check in the mail. To you.
Thanks for everybody participating in that
Nonprofit, right?
conversation. Parcel number 2 is a great fit, and I would agree with everybody. I've struggled a little bit with trying to figure out the east side of Franklin Road and that property because it's got such a difficult access. But I am very, very interested in Roper's Knob and how we would access that. And I think that's part of the pursuit we would have. I look for some more options as far as what that number 5 parcel could be. I'm not completely closed-minded to it, but I would also remind you that at least half this board has not been a participant in ranking capital projects. And those capital projects rankings are difficult and challenging. Whenever we do them, we're going to find that we have a whole lot more needs than we have money, and it comes down to some tough choices. A lot of the money that we have in surplus has been programmed. I think we can find some money to do some of this, and I'm not opposed to continue to look at it and trying to figure it out. But as we try to figure it out, I'm thinking, how can we get to Roper's Knob from that Cool Springs extension area, which, anyway, that's all I've got. So let's go to 9, which is deny sewer for the 2051 Wilson Pike.
Mr. Mayor, could I make a quick request?
Sure.
I'm not sure about our timing. Could we go ahead and move number 10 up? Just because it's a special event thing, we might want to keep moving.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I'm not sure what
see
the
that.
balance of our time will take. We may use it all on number 9. I'm not sure. So,
well,
we have representatives here from Downtown Rotary, and who's our new sponsor of the Christmas parade. So that's exciting too. But probably a quick item. But if we could maybe move that up.
Well, let's talk about number 10 real quick, and I appreciate that request. The special event permit for Christmas parade sponsored by Downtown Franklin Rotary Club on December the 2nd, 2023. Alan Sims is here in case there's questions for him. It's the same event, just a different sponsor.
Correct. Same event, same day and time.
Good. Let's go back to item number 9 then. which is deny sewer availability.
We want to bring our water team up. I think Vernon's coming up as well. This is a specific denial request, but it also has some pretty broad ramifications for the balance of this basin and future development. So it is both a specific request, but also a broader policy discussion. Our goal tonight is to really get you information and get this in your head. We don't expect to get a direction tonight, but to get this so you can start thinking through the impact and implications of it. And I will go off if you need. I'm off.
There we go.
Yeah.
Oh. Do you read the item or?
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. All right. So this is just a typical. I'll go this one.
Can I ask that you identify exactly where we're talking about on this map? Because there's nothing on this map, not one street except Wilson Pike in a little pigeonhole area. So, you know, you're talking about this and I'm not sure, I live over there, so I know what you're doing. But I'm not sure everybody's going to know where this is.
Okay. So I'll just introduce Scott and Ben with the water department. So Scott's one of our engineers. Ben is our infrastructure and development manager. This is a request to deny sewer availability for 2051 Wilson Pike. We have so Scott has prepared a presentation in which we'll go over kind of some of the pros and cons of denying this availability and what the water department recommends, and he'll go over the exact location of that.
Would you be able to pull up the actual PowerPoint there?
Actually, page 5 has a better map.
Yeah, I was going to get into that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure everybody knew where it was.
Right.
Because you can talk about it, and they'll go, well, where is it?
Right. Okay, so we were going to get into what the actual request is, some background on the basin that it's in. We're going to make our recommendation, and then we've got a request to make of you guys for guidance on how to handle this property and the basin as a whole. So if you go to the next slide, that red outline property is the property we're talking about. It's 2051 Wilson Pike. It's hard to see on there, but the western property line is kind of North Chapel Road. So you see southwest of that red property corner, that's North Chapel Road that goes down and over to the left. This pinkish background color there is the Mays Creek Basin. The purple lines we'll talk about, but they are future proposed interceptors based on our basin plan. Blue outline there is the urban growth boundary line. So the applicant requested, like I said, it's 2051 Wilson Pike. It's outside the city limits, but within our urban growth boundary. They requested denial of sewer to build basically an equestrian retreat in the county, is what I understand. It's 23 single-family homes, a barn, and a pool. Their anticipated sewer flow is 10,500 gallons a day, or 30 single-family unit equivalents. Yes, 30, yes. This larger map just shows the Mays Creek Basin as a whole. Like I said, the purple lines represent proposed future interceptors. The outlined properties in black are some other properties that have requested and received denial from the board. So a little background on the basin. The basin's approximately 9,900 acres of land. About 5,600 acres of it are within the UGB, so about 55% of that basin is currently within our urban growth boundary. It's the second largest sewer basin after Goose Creek, which is approximately 10,500 acres. So as we did, I didn't do it, I wasn't here, but as was done with all of our basins, basin plans were drawn, developed by consultants back in the day to talk about how we could serve them with sewer, basically. The basin plan for this one dates back to at least 2006. It was updated in 2013 to include the proposed interceptor layout, the purple lines that you see on the map. That update was adopted by the board in 2013. So there's been other requests within the basin. The largest one probably was the Smith property. It's just south of this property in question. And at the time, we recommended a solution that consisted of a temporary regional pump station that would have a force main alignment that we hadn't determined yet. We didn't determine where that was going to actually outfall. And that pump station could potentially be relocated farther down into the basin as further development occurs. The previous denials within the basin have typically been for single-family homes or smaller properties. I think the largest one that was denied was 4357 Murfreesboro Road. It's that, it's that one down there. And the difference with those properties is that they had no impact on the rest of the basin. There was no proposed interceptors going through the property. There were no, there's really no, not much of an impact at all, or minimal impact to serve the rest of the basin. So what staff recommends is not denying the property's sanitary sewer, but as we do with all the properties that we look at for development, is we require them to put in the infrastructure needed to serve it with sewer. Denying this property sewer is going to prevent approximately 1,246 acres from accessing sewer in the future. That's about 22% of the total basin acreage located within the urban growth boundary. And allowing the properties to develop in the county strips the city of any control over how our urban growth boundary develops. And in denying them sewer service and not collecting their impact fees and proportionate share of the future interceptor and the future infrastructure, in essence, makes the system build out not financially feasible for much of any of the properties. So I know the planning department and water management had recommended reducing the UGB in this area to remove some of the basin from our urban growth boundary. And my understanding is the board expressed a desire at that time to keep it in the UGB, knowing it would be difficult, if not impossible, to sewer. Keeping it in the UGB under the 1101 law implies the ability to serve it with sewer, just because it says, you're supposed to identify territory in which the municipality is better able and prepared than other municipalities to effectively and efficiently provide services. So if properties in this basin are denied the ability or denied sewer, it impedes our ability to follow the approved basin plan. Now, we're currently working with a consultant to update the basin plan with more specifics. We're looking at the depths and the layout a little closer and figure out, time frame options, how it's going to be impacted in 10 years, 20 years, things like that. The scope is still being reviewed. We're looking at possibly having the end study by the end of the year and bringing it to the board sometime early next year. So essentially, it's my understanding the board wants to keep this within the UGB, and if that's the case, we just need guidance, with this property, how do we address this property's request for denial, but also bigger picture, other properties that come in.
Well, I think you said one thing I want to maybe ask you to repeat, and that is if we were to deny sewer availability for this property, that would immediately prevent us in the future from being able to address having a sewer system or for the entire
The
basin.
properties that, well, it
Are
it's
about
off a part of the
22%
basin.
of the.
Right.
1,246 acres.
Right, because the interceptor that would potentially run through this property based on the basin plan, the properties north of that would fall, the sewer would fall through this property. So if you didn't have that, it wouldn't.
1,246 acres.
Yeah, and you can't request, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Because I had the same question. So there's not a way of requesting an easement once we let them out? We can't get the easement to run the line? I mean, is that?
Well, there are a lot of issues with that. Once that happens, if we grant the easement, or if they give us an easement for that, we have no control over how that easement's developed. We have no control over, is it even going to work for what we're doing? Is it going to be graded in such a way that the sewer is forced to be, overly deep? You know, we have a problem in the Harts Landmark subdivision now where a water line was put in and there was an easement and homes were allowed to be built pretty close to the easement, if not on the easement, and structures and things and grading over the easement, over the water line that's already in place. So there's a lot of different considerations with that, I guess.
Yeah, and to elaborate on that, so staff did, we looked at those options. We looked at the potential for the applicant to provide a layout or an easement through the property that would suit the needs of the sewer system and how that would impact the properties north of that. Like Scott said, there's a lot of challenges with that. The biggest challenge really is you're required at that point to work with Williamson County to ensure that the grading of the property, the development of the property, and then the overall alignment still works as we intend. And we have seen challenges with that. Not to say that couldn't be done, but after looking at the property as a whole, it may be a solution for this one property, but we often are contacted about properties that look to they want denial into the county and some of these areas. And the challenge really becomes, as we look at these properties, some, as Scott mentioned earlier, they don't have as big an impact on the overall system. But other properties such as this one has a greater impact. So, I mean, that's an option that we could obviously look more into and have discussions with the county. But, you know, at the very forefront, staff didn't feel that option was a sure route to ensure that the sewer was to be able to serve the area north of that.
I have a question. Where are we standing on the urban growth boundary now? You know, because that was supposed to be getting ready to be talked about.
Yeah, that process has just started, and the clock is kind of ticking on that, and it will conclude by the early part of next year. And that would include the updates that you all have approved. That'll come back to you, and Planning Commission will have a public hearing on those updated boundaries in July, and then come to the board in August, and there'll be a second public hearing leading into the formal process later in the fall.
Alderman Berger? I'd like to hear from everybody if they could, because they're asking for direction. Go ahead.
I had something to add.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Vernon, then I'll recognize Alderman Berger.
Just to complete that.
Who does?
Yeah, thank you, and good evening, everybody. And Scott, Ben, Michelle, and our whole team have had these discussions regularly about how are we going to serve the future urban growth areas that we've said we want to have within the city of Franklin. And if I can try to oversimplify this discussion to add more context to it, is that, first of all and foremost, public infrastructure, be it road, sewer, or water, is the most expensive investment that property owners and the city make in growing our community. And in this particular instance, that we conserve this property, even though the property owner wants to develop in a lower dense type of use, 30 SFUEs, an equestrian estate. However, as we look to extend the infrastructure further south, and Scott rightfully talked about the Smith property that wants to do a little bit more with their property, has more acreage. If we're not able to collect fees based on the proportionality of the development potential in the area, then we won't be able, it's not going to be financially feasible to extend public infrastructure, which ultimately results in a conversation to either allow a property owner to develop in the county and use an alternative sewer system. And that doesn't make the highest and best use of land, nor does it really make sense it opens up a whole nother discussion about whether the city wants to get into managing alternative sewage systems, drip fields. And we've intentionally looked at areas that we have infrastructure potential going in, this being one the state, as you know, investing millions of dollars to extend Highway 96 to the east. So there is a potential here in growing the city. Our infrastructure is somewhat on the doorstep of this property. And if they were going to develop more densely, this conversation likely wouldn't be had, because extending the infrastructure to this property and through it would be pretty much a non-issue. However, that's not their vision for it. But we should that's the guidance that we want to receive for you, or we're asking to receive for you as we go forward, because the next property owner might be of smaller size and density, but they all contribute to this infrastructure that helps us grow at least sewer and the sewer system. But then we got to look at the roads, and in this area, Millcroft, and we look at the water.
I'm going to ask Alderman Berger, then we'll flip back to the vice mayor and go down.
Sure, sure.
Down.
Is it possible that we'd have a minute to talk?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were here, Mr. White.
So,
Yeah.
I do.
I've got a posse with me too, but I'll try to.
As he's coming up, let me ask a question. I'm confused here. Because if we vote no on the denial, what do they do? Then we certainly cannot provide sewer. It's
Can
not-
eventually provide sewer.
Yeah, but how does denial affect your ability to run your horse business now? So if we vote against this, and we can't provide sewer to you in any timely manner,
Then I got to take the floor to go.
yeah, how do you run your business? And because we can't even get you sewer for a long time yet. So how does that affect your business? And I need to know.
Yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself, Mr. White, and I'll give you a few minutes to.
Okay, thank you very much. My name's Dean White. I've had a residence in this area for the past 10 years, originally from Memphis, Tennessee guy all the way. We found this property 16 months ago and bought it. And we were told well, I want to say one thing. Michelle, Scott, Ben, Vernon have all been great to help me understand the process that we're going through. And Eric, I've heard about you. I don't think I've had any direct contact with you, but I want to commend them as very, very good public servants. Our frustration is, I did due diligence before we bought this property. I went to Andrew Orr, went to several city people and discussed the situation. They say, you file your application for provision of services, it'll be denied, you'll be going through the county. And they said it was ultimately your responsibility, but consistently, BOMA had been denying those applications. So I bought the property on the strength of that. And we've talked there's been some discussion about 23 houses. We really, when we were told we were going to go through the county, we were told we could do 23 houses. But one of the other permitted things is what's called a rural retreat. Y'all probably know about South Hall. Right after I bought this property, I learned about South Hall, and I said, golly, these guys have my dream. And then I found out that South Hall has invested like $350 million. I said, that ain't my dream. So, but what we want to do, what I really, in my heart of hearts, would probably do a South Hall light, something more like the Short Farm, if y'all are familiar with that, going across from West Haven. What we're doing right now, I grew up, my family's always been in farming. I grew up going to a farm in Western Kentucky. We had horses, cattle. I was out there on horseback every day, and there's memories of that part of my life that I just cherish. And my dream is to recreate that situation on this piece of property, but sharing it. There's no way, I mean, I certainly can't afford a 116-acre private place. I would like to share that opportunity with other people. And what we have done is built a barn. We've got paddocks out there, got 13 horses, and one we found out got one coming on the way. I can't tell you how excited I am. I'm not looking for a big commercial development. I want to have a place where people like me can build a home or have access to a rural retreat, which would be like a weekend home for people. I want it to be a small community of people, but I what I'd really like is to have something that makes sense. One thing that these people, Vernon has been very kind to me. He's explained to me that the city can say that they're going to provide us sewer and that he's going to give me access to sewer. But there's a big caveat that comes with that, and that is I've got to pay to extend to those services. I don't know where we would hook in. I mean, that's one thing we haven't been explained. I can look at that map, and if that's the map I've got to, I mean, we're talking probably 10 or 15 miles of sewer that I've got to pay for. And I'm frustrated because I really think the city needs to keep this urban growth boundary in a situation where you guys can control how that's developed. Because what Williamson County would allow us to do, let's say it's 23 houses. We have 23 houses. Each one of them has to have a separate septic system that is pumping completely contaminated water into our soils. That's the worst plan that I can ever imagine. There would be sprawl, we would have, it promotes sprawl. It's like everything wrong with developing a city. What I think, I mean, this is just a suggestion. I've been a lawyer for 46 years. I did a lot of land use work in Memphis, and I try to think about sensible solutions. What I suggested to Vernon, and I think to Scott, maybe Ben, is maybe we ought to adopt, everybody at the city says no decentralized systems. We're going to provide sewer, and you need to be on these big sewer mains with $100 million plants, but there's alternatives. And I've got a gentleman here today to talk about some of those alternatives. But what about we build these, anything within the metro growth area that has got the opportunity to be developed in the future? Let's require that they put everything sewer to code, where that system could be tied into sewer when sewer gets there. And what I think Jim is going to say, if y'all give him an opportunity to talk, we can do scalable, decentralized systems that purify the water and actually when it comes out of that system, it's just like West Haven. West Haven's getting water pumped to it from the city sewer plants, and it's being used for irrigation and for ponds, and that's what I'd love to do. I've got a pond right next to my best septic site where we could recycle that water right back into the environment, and you're not pumping untreated sewage into our wonderful earth. And I think that would be my suggestion, but I think there may be other ideas. I've been told that that's a non-starter by these fine gentlemen.
Yeah, well, just as a caution, we're about to run out of time for our work session. So I think we probably need to have it come back for the board to have some more discussion, because there's just not enough time for
Yeah,
to
I
discuss,
understand.
and also for your folks that you brought with you, Mr.
And
White.
maybe what we could have is like a work task force where different options are discussed.
Yeah, I'm going to conclude with Mr. Girth and Mr. Stuckey on this, and then we're going to.
Thank you, Mayor.
Right.
To get to Alderman Berger's question before Mr. White spoke, we can, as a city, serve the property. And much like the Smith's property, for you familiar with that discussion, we looked at alternatives of how they could install that infrastructure. It's just costly. And giving up the ability to serve this property or participate in extending that sewer to the property, as Scott had mentioned, will make it, if we don't do that, it'll make serving the rest of the basin financially unfeasible. And that's the simplified version of this type of discussion, and something to think about as we look into growth, potential growth areas in the community. At what point do we make some type of investment, knowing we're going to recapture Goose Creek area? We've had some of that discussion, where we are likely to recapture either through taxes, property sales, but also for impact fees that help us extend the system yet even farther.
Well, Vernon, you said that, yes, we can service them, but we can't today and we can't tomorrow. So that's, to me, not logical that the answer, I understand what you're saying. We can eventually, but that's going to be years away.
No, we can, and we have always required the property owner, the developer, to extend the infrastructure.
But how many miles? How many miles?
Well, I think we should come back with the cost, and it's very similar to the Smith property.
And just to mention, there are other options than the lengthy.
Yeah. One of the things he brought up that I'm not opposed to at all is for them to build out all the sewer systems and everything else to get ready to hook onto sewer when it gets to the area, but also work with us. Smiths might work with us. They could work with the Smiths. Everybody could work together. I asked a long time ago, and I asked again the other day about, a basin, a whole study for that area and a regional plan that we don't have yet. And we need that because
They're
we need
working
to
on it.
make, I know we are, but we need, I hate to hold people up, but at the same time, it's like snap your fingers, you can't do it tomorrow. Right. But in what time period are we going to answer this gentleman in 6 months, 2 months? Are we going to wait 2 or 3 years to give him the answer? I don't know how all that plays out, because on his point, his time and money and his development and what he wants to do, and on our part, we certainly have all these questions that we have to answer.
So let me speak to this.
Yeah.
And I know we're closing this out, but this is what you need to be thinking about as a board, because this is big picture.
Yep.
And what someone wants to do, and we respect very much what Mr. White wants to do, but what somebody wants to do in a shorter time frame, 2, 3, 4 years, you want to be careful that that doesn't lock you into or rob you of solutions that help you solve the 10 and 20 and 30-year issues. And you were very specific about wanting to include this broader area in the urban growth boundary. And so to do that, we need to think about how we serve this. And I think part of what the point Vernon was making, and I'll draw this parallel to the south plant that we want to build for treatment. There's capacity that ties to how we're going to serve our urban growth boundary at that plant. We also got to look at how the infrastructure that will bring that, convey the sewer for treatment to that site. And so you look at maybe a 10-year window for that plant. Do you look at a 10-year window for how you do maybe major interceptor lines that help you get out to serve it, advance that, so that you're in parallel looking at your collection system build out with your treatment capacity build out? And that then you begin to have something that folks that own that property can think about and give them a better understanding how it works, and how we over time manage the build out of our urban growth boundary. Sewer is the key to how you manage your growth. And so the more you recognize that and how you do this, and you've got both the individual request, but you got the broader area that you're trying to serve. The decision you make here affects nearly a quarter of the rest of that basin. And that's what we're trying to be really thoughtful about. And that's why we wanted to plant those seeds tonight. But it's not something we're going to solve tonight. It's going to take a little longer to think that through. But I think part of what we're looking at is how do we in parallel maybe advance key parts of the collection system while we're looking at the treatment system and then recapture that as development comes online.
And I think too, we have to take the Smith property, we have to take this gentleman here, and we've got to take some of these other people that are interested in this and get them all in a room. We start talking about how we solve this problem and maybe get them to partner with the city. Thanks.
Okay, let's end this meeting, and we'll be back in about 10 to 15 minutes.